you run for me? If I go, would you be happy in the end? So is it all for nothing? Was it all for nothing? Those memories, was it all for nothing? Was it all for nothing? So is it all for nothing?
into the Boise State Game Pants Esports Arena. You are joining us for Week 5 of our Overwatch 2 Esports Tower Rumble. We are super excited here tonight. We have a lot of teams here tonight. The Riptides, this is their second Overwatch Rumble that they've been in so far, and then longtime rivals, the Everests and Tornadoes, will all be duking it out for a spot in the Grand Finals tonight. I am your host, Colby D'Angelo Alloway, and joining me to call all of the action is Artie Nerdy Bird Rain. And since we are officially on Overwatch 2 beta, are there any heroes you feel like maybe didn't transition as well from Overwatch 1 so we might not see a ton of tonight?
So I definitely feel like unless you are a god on the Reinhardt, you probably don't want to be playing him into this because he heavily relies on, having an off tank to protect him most of the time. And in some cases, it's a D.Va, sometimes a Zarya. And especially because Lucio now tends to be, he needs a little bit of a nerf. Lucio redditing is very much so the meta. And with that in mind, you're not going to have your Lucio to help you get out of trouble right now. So good luck if you're going to walk the Reinhardt with a Lucio, because your Lucio is no longer going to be your safety in that regard. And then with regards to the supports, unfortunately, the raid boss of Brigitte, we're probably not going to see her tonight. She's not as strong unless you have someone who's an absolute warlord and can get rally up almost every other fight.
And that is a little bit harder to do now, especially because the fights are so staggered and things like that. Are there any specific DPS that you'd like to highlight? Because we've mentioned tanks and we've mentioned supports.
So as far as the DPS, all are very viable. Sombra's a little bit more niche now, unless you're very gifted at her again. EMP can be extremely strong, but because fights, as you mentioned, are extremely staggered, they typically there aren't as many team fights taking place. EMP doesn't seem to be as impactful. However, we might see a three-piece combo come out, in the form of Sojourn, Soldier 76, and the Mercy, which is, the wings, the legs, and the thighs.
Yeah.
They're extremely strong right now, so we might see that pop out tonight. And if that does happen and they decide to push forward as a unit, good luck to everyone involved with that one.
I can't get over the wings, the legs, and the thighs. That was gold, and I have not heard that before, so thank you for blessing me with that on this fine Tuesday. So here, before we get into the actual matches themselves, Overwatch fans have been waiting a really long time for Overwatch 2. There has been a lot of hype buildup, and we are getting closer and closer to having it playable every single day. So in honor of that, we do have a little bit of a hype video here for you tonight before our matches. Wow, what a hype video. We are super excited again to get into Overwatch 2 matchups tonight. And today's competition on this fine May 10th is actually, just as we mentioned before, it is going to be the Riptides, the Everests, and the Tornadoes going in. This is, again, the Riptides, their second Rumble. They're trying to figure out what they're doing here and trying to take some maps off of the Everests and the Tornadoes tonight, who have been incredibly, their rivalry has been bitter because we saw, so Everest's previously to the formation of the Tornadoes team, they used to be a very, very big, dominant force that it felt like almost nobody could beat. And then some rosters were switched up, some new teams were made, and actually a couple of their main players ended up on the Tornadoes, which has been huge. And since then, it has almost always been the Everest and the Tornadoes in the grand finals going at each other tonight. So the Riptides will be looking to see if they can kind of like upset that and end up in the grand finals themselves. Now, we talked a little bit about what DPS you expect to see. What tanks do you expect to see in this new Overwatch 2 meta?
I definitely anticipate seeing some Orisa play. I know some people are like, she's not as strong as you think she is, but her kit is so in-depth that she can actually do quite a bit when she's supported properly, and you actually got to see it in that hype video on Coliseum. If you drop from a high ground using her ultimate, it pulls them into the air, and it's really difficult to get away from that point. Also, I do expect to see some Doomfist. Doomfist right now, I don't know what's going on with some of his abilities, but the gravity's set really low or something. He can fly around the map in some cases, so I expect we'll see some possible Doomfist. And then beyond that, Sigma and Winston are both insanely strong when used properly, especially if you don't have a diva who basically designates their time to just breaking Winston bubbles. You're not going to be doing much damage as a team if you're not taking care of them. So that's what I expect to see. But also, if you choose to go Doomfist, you better know your movement.
That's fair. You got to know the Doom rollouts, which on new maps will take a little bit of work here. And we are going to go ahead and see how that advice compares to Doc's keys to the game, which we have new ones for Overwatch 2. Doc's keys to the game in Overwatch: never take a fair fight, which means take fights in unexpected places when they're unprepared, and keep your tank alive. There's only one of them. And Doc's keys to the game are presented to us by Drop In Gaming. Improve your game sense, improve your team play, and improve your performance under pressure. You'll get matched up with great players and professional coaches to help you rank up. And again, you touched on it early, Nerdy. Keep your tank alive. You only have one of them. What do you think the lack of the off tank is going to do to some of these teams?
It means flanking is a lot more viable because you no longer have someone that can take a lot of damage and go take care of it by themselves. And so that comes down to your positioning, your rotations, and doing a lot of just tagging a flank and being ready for when it's going to happen. And that means when you recognize what's going to happen, your team needs to either push up and go take on the front force of the team and get out of the line of sight of the flankers, or your team just, kind of backs off a little bit and you send two people to go take care of those flankers. Because either way, either your front line or their front line is not going to have all the power that's necessary in order to take a full team fight, so it's going to slow things down. You might even stop a full team fight from happening, but it's definitely making sure you keep an eye on flankers.
That makes a lot of sense. And actually, we've seen a lot of Genji being super viable now. I mean, people are just all over the internet. You see nothing but like new Genji plays. I mean, even in Overwatch 1, people that can't get into the Overwatch 2 beta are now practicing their Genji and seeing what they can do on those flanks. So we'll see if somebody decides to use that tonight, or if we see the Soldier Sojourn that has been super, super prevalent, especially even with the Soldier nerf, but the major Sojourn buff that has come out.
We'll have to wait and see. We are going to be starting out on Push, which is the new map type, and I love and hate this map type. We'll have to see how it works out for these guys, though.
What do you love about Push?
I love that you can really extend overtime. I mean, I've seen a map completely swing from a team that almost got to checkpoint 3 to the other team getting it all the way to their side. However, the downside is that typically whichever team gets the first fight and pushes that robot at least 10 meters to begin with is the team that ends up winning, just because of how long you have to actually escort the robot to start pushing the barrier, because that entire time that you're moving him along where there's no barrier pushing, you're not gaining any ground.
So it's kind of like Control, where first fight is very determinant of the rest of the fight, but it sounds like a little bit more prevalent even than it is on Control, because it's just so hard to turn back around. And we see that 5v5 Fulcrum on the Orisa that you were talking about.
Very excited to see them pull out on this Orisa. I definitely enjoy her ability to absorb a lot of damage when used properly. I mean, unfortunately, we'll lose Arc immediately.
And that's unfortunate because that's your Lucio, that's your speed, that's your backline peel. Joe is also going to go down. That is the Riptide's down too before the fight has even begun, and Fulcrum is just being forced to give up all of the space. Actually, is not even going to be able to get out here even as he backs into his Moira and Soldier Helix.
And now it's just a matter of getting out. We also did lose Joe very early on, so that's a full reset. That's a lot of free space there for Team Everest to push forward, and they have Chum is Fum on that D.Va, so that means they're going to take majority of that soldier damage. They can eat Moira orbs. They're going to take Lucio damage as well, and the Orisa, so maybe possibly swapping over to something a little bit more splash damage would be beneficial for the team. It does look like Joe's going to go to the Genji.
It looks like they're going for more flanks than splash damage. We'll see. They're probably going to be looking for some off angles here, which that Orisa might actually not be the best tank for. Oh my gosh, KJ's just going to get that massive visor just barely off screen there as Chum is Fum, the solo tank, is just being able to just push. I mean, you see the bot there. There's nothing that is stopping Chum is Fum as the remainder of their team holds the Riptides in their spawn.
What's very interesting is you don't typically stick your tank onto the push bot by themselves here. You normally want them pushing forward and being your front line while you have either support or DPS who has a lot of range pushing that robot. But when you're staggering the other team this hard, it's pretty easy to keep a tank on that payload.
And it looks like now the fight is actually going to come all the way to payload here. It looks like Chum is Fum is forced to back up. The rest of their team behind them know they're going to go in right on that Soldier 76. And it looks like this is just kind of a game of cat and mouse as Avian gets 2 eliminations off screen, and it looks like the Riptides are going to reset once again.
Smell is going to go down as well. They got a decent amount of damage pushing forward with Smell using their ultimate. Unfortunately, it just wasn't followed up on fast enough. You still got to be calling targets because the amount of speed and the amount of heal that supports have now when they're out of fire for just a little bit of time creates so much sustain.
Especially on Moira. That's something that we didn't talk about pregame, but I feel like is worth mentioning because Moira has incredible survivability now coupled with that Lucio especially. We now get into fight here. Some ultimates are being committed, and at this point, the Everest are forced to give up a little bit of space. No, right as that, they're going to sound barrier, enabling them to be aggressive and push past this bridge. But they're not taking more space than necessary. A massive pulse bomb is going to force them to rotate back, and that might actually be the first time the Everest are going to have to reset. No, not quite. The Riptides didn't follow up on full team, so the Everest still get to hold this point.
Unfortunately, their Orisa pushed too far forward without any support and just got eaten alive by the DPS and 2 supports looking at them immediately. And this payload's getting, well, sorry, this barrier's getting extremely close to that last checkpoint. And we do see the Cassidy swap from Smell. We'll see if that's enough, but remember, they don't have stun anymore. They just have a sticky grenade that really can only take care of squishies. If D.Va eats it, it's not going to do anything.
And it looks like that D.Va's getting burned down fast, almost losing the mech there as Mango, Joe, and Fulcrum are all going to go down in quick succession, enabling the bomb to come out and enabling the Everest to take that space once again.
And does look like this barrier is going to touch without any contest here for the last possible second. We're going to have to see a swap over to the... Oh, never mind. There is no swap. This is push. So with that, Everest will win the first round.
It feels like final point push kind of puts you in a situation that's similar to 2CP almost because you are right outside their spawn doors. We got to see it, and because of that clean team wipe, the Everests were able to just cleanly win that. How do you usually see that fight outside their spawn doors go, though?
Typically, you see a lot more of the stall swaps start to happen. You know, you swap to the Lucio Moira. I believe Wrecking Ball is actually on pause right now for this version of the beta, at least at this point in time, which this was recorded because there's a bug with him in spawn. You can make everyone DC. So it would have been beneficial to swap over to, you know, the Winston, the D.Va, just get out as fast as you could, swap to the Tracer and the Soldier, and just try to get a body onto that barrier to stop it from moving just a little bit, because it may not seem like you're doing much, but getting time for your team to come out does so much in this game mode. It's very important, and no ultimate is worth losing the round on, so swaps need to start happening at that point.
And the point of a stall comp, again, I mean, you touched on it a little bit, it is time. It's not necessarily to, like, win that fight. I mean, it would be really, really nice if you could, but usually if you're pushed in the position to stall, there's usually, like, you have maybe 1 or 2 members max on the cart against the full 6. So you're looking to do 2 things. You're looking to trade, and you're looking to stall. And if you get those trades and if your team can consistently come out with those eliminations, then you can maybe win the fight. But it is a multi-step process, which is why stall is such a viable strategy. Like, everybody has to stall, but rarely is it successful. And we are going to go over to Kings Row as our second map, which is hybrid in this best of 3. And Kings Row during the daytime. How are you feeling about that?
Okay, so I mentioned this before we started the broadcast, and that is some of these maps make my eyes twitch out a little bit. Seeing Kings Row during the daytime, or whatever you want to call this, sunset-ish, is a little strange. I mean, I understand wanting to shake things up, but I wish Kings Row remained at night.
I think King's Row at night was one of the most beautiful maps in originally Overwatch 1. And again, I think we are both incredibly biased as people who have played a lot of Overwatch 1. We got very used to seeing it at night. I don't necessarily feel like it looks bad in the daytime here. I actually think it does that statue there that we can see a lot of justice here. And there's that Mercy Soldier 76 combo that you were talking about on the side of the Riptides here. We'll see if the wings and the legs, as you called it earlier, are able to do much against a Bastion.
I'm a little worried right now for Frozen because they're going to be heavily relying on Ana nades to keep them alive. And if Chum is Bump eats those nades, they're going to be in a very rough situation.
Especially because of that Discord orb, you really need that extra healing. And it looks like Frozen Phoenix has almost pushed up a little bit too far as Arc is going to get eliminated. That was risky for Frozen Phoenix going all the way up to choke by themselves.
We did have Smell take out KJ to help out just a little bit, but the rotations can still happen here, especially Bastion is now very mobile. They may not have self-heal, but they can still do a lot of damage, and D.Va's just claiming space right now for the Everest.
On that high ground, which actually, because of the Riptide's current comp, they don't actually have a lot of that verticality there. I mean, you have the Hanzo, and if Hanzo can get up there, Mercy can get up there. But that's not ideally who you want in the face of the D.Va.
No, and honestly, starting out on the low ground for the Riptides was not the best move, especially when you're running this Hanzo, and the Ana should not have been low ground either. Both of them should have been positioning into better locations to be out of LOS of this DPS that's coming out. As you can see, KJ is just eating this front line alive, as is Joe.
Positional mistakes notwithstanding, it does actually look like the Everest are having a very difficult time approaching the Riptides, even though they are on the low ground. And it looks like KJ, that felt a little bit personal. They got pulled back into there and could not get out. And now at this point, Joe, it seems like they almost heard us talking about that high ground as Joe's right up there getting that spam on them.
It's very important to realize that without that extra tank on the field, you're down one resource, and the next resource you can get is that extra positioning. And so maintaining high ground control is important regardless of what map you're on in most cases, unless it's a stall on the point.
It looks like as this fight starts, a big two-man nade is going to come out onto Chum's Bum. They will wisely give up that space. I mean, they have a little bit of time to kind of back up, especially as they have claimed this high ground. Soldier 76 no longer has a claim to it, and I think Avian will be an absolute menace as this fight is going to start beginning here. No, the Everests are still rotating, and at this point, they've committed about 45 seconds to one fight. They can't afford to lose this.
We've got Joe doing the smart thing and rotating to the high ground, realizing no one noticed. And there goes Dragon. Mercy's going to go down too.
That is both DPS down, however, though, and with the ultimate coming out, I do actually expect, even though this isn't a very clean fight win for the Riptides, I do expect it to come out, especially as that nanovisor from the high ground comes out. On to Yurta Zenyatta, he's looking for him. He's going to try to find the Lucio too, but too much eating right in his face. On the back of Chum's Bum, he will end up getting eliminated as Avian has respawned, but the Riptides are still throwing bodies on the point.
And we do hear the Orisa ult come online as well. They're so low right now.
Stressful. That Mercy is doing their best from the sky, but the issue about being in the sky is there's a Widowmaker. So even though the ultimate is super valuable, it looks like the Riptides will finally have to back up and give them space. And honestly, not a bad hold on the side of the Riptides, especially considering they didn't take advantage of that high ground, and they just did this from low ground, circumventing the Everests. Do you think more sustained in the support lineup would help the Everests push more like they'd like to?
I would have to say yes. While Lucio Zenyatta is a great combo, the issue here now becomes line of sight, because those orbs from the Zen are going to become pretty useless as soon as someone's out of your LOS for, I believe, 3 seconds. The orb goes away, and with how much high ground there is to hide with here, if Team Riptides decides to start using it, they can just avoid the extra damage that Zen provides. And here comes the aerial strike, and I think we might lose our Ana. Nope, they got out of it.
Just barely out of it. I was a little bit worried for Arc on that Mercy there. We saw one of them go immediately over them, and I was like, oh no. But Joe is going to find Avian in that corridor, and it looks like the Riptides are going to go, or the Everest, excuse me, are going to go ahead and go in on that elimination. They are pushing this card, and they are now up 2 here. The Everest have all the ability to take all the space, except now they're walking into that Soldier 76 with that hard Mercy pocket there, they're having a little bit of a difficult time taking space, but now that the Soldier's gone, that Mercy should, no, they're gonna go ahead and get that res onto Joe, which is really big, and then prompts the Tranquility immediately after that. The Everest want to win this fight. We are committing ult, we are taking space, we are on your Orisa, but it feels like the target focus is a little bit lacking as this fight goes on longer than it reasonably should, even as they're going to win.
Long fights are okay though, especially when it's staggering out the defense as long as it is here, but you're 100% right. The target focus isn't where it needs to be. That Mercy took way too long to go down. It looked like for a while it was just Triplet and Chama's Fum looking at her for the longest time. But they will get that checkpoint with 3 minutes on the clock to get the last one.
And the thing about a Mercy res is you, as a Lucio, especially with no more CC in the game, you can int on that. And you can just eliminate that Mercy. I mean, she's just standing there, and she can't really do anything to stop you as the Everest are taking space in the left-hand corner.
You're 100% right, and the death of the CC in this game did make me very sad, but it provided some awkward buffs to some heroes that we'll see in the future. But right now, honestly, I feel like Riptides, the Orisa is not working out for you. That Javelin CC, which is the only thing that's left next to a Roadhog hook, is just not enough right now. It's time to swap over to the D.Va and start getting some distance on this payload for your own team.
And it looks like now they're in final fight territory, still on that Orisa. The goal right now of the Riptides is trades. They're not even able to touch, though, to stall out any time. But honestly, 2 minutes and 25 seconds, that is an average hold. The Riptides did not have a terrible defense. Walk us through some small things that could have made their defense amazing.
Definitely swapping off the Orisa, giving you something that has more viability, taking that forward damage coming out from the Zenyatta, the Widow, the Soldier, and honestly, using high ground control. Every single fight, it looked like the Riptides were always positioned on the low ground, which to me is not being prepared for a fight. If there is this much verticality on a point, you need to be taking advantage of that, because the more angles that a team has to look at to do damage on you, the less likely they are to all be looking at the same person. So take angles, use the high ground to your advantage, and for the love, please stop engaging or being too far forward from your tank for them to protect you.
And that makes a lot of sense. There were actually also a lot of times where we would see them go down the tank and then use the ultimates, and that actually is something that the Riptides have been working on. They've been working on planning ultimates, and we see that occasionally, but sometimes we see them slip up and use an ultimate when they're down too. And that's typically not when you want to be aggressive, and usually you want to use ultimates to be aggressive here. The Everest are swapping over to that Ana Zenyatta. Do you think that duo is as good as it was in Overwatch 1?
I actually feel like it's a bit more powerful now, especially due to the lack of cleansing that exists, because if they're running a D.Va, yes, they'll be able to eat it, but with the Orisa, the only thing that they're going to be relying on is using that spear spin to eat it, and if they don't eat it in time, there's nothing else that can get rid of it. There's going to be no shields coming out from the Brigitte because they don't have one, so the only option is to back off and wait for that ante to wear off if it does manage to land. So Triplet, if they can land these antes or just get it on their tank before they engage, it's going to be extremely difficult for that tank to go down, and it does look like we had an unfortunate disconnect for the Riptide, so I think we're waiting for them to get back in.
And it looks like they will be back in almost immediately here as we see Smellusion loading into the game here, back on that Bastion. They're still hard committing to that strat. What does Bastion Widow need to work here? I mean, other than not getting popped by the Zenyatta.
Taking angles here, yet again, is going to be one of the most powerful things that you can do. I mean, you're a bit slower moving when you're trying to get high ground control, but that's very important here. I mean, Widow can be very oppressive just being on that high ground. However, one of the things that I would suggest is the Riptides all rotate through the right side high ground going through the theaters, because, I mean, more than likely, you're going to end up with a Mei on King's Row, and we do see that coming out right now from Team Everest, and if one person gets walled off, unless it's a tank, you can say goodbye to them. So always rotating through theater and just trying to see even if there's a Mei there, and if not, you can just go through main. But if there's a Mei, everyone needs to go through that right side high ground and make sure that they don't get walled off as one person or two people. It's very important to gather that information when you can.
Especially into an Ana Zen, who have the ability to insta-murder you through anti and Orb of Discord here. It looks like we are back in game. Connection issues have been solved. Smellusion now back over on that Hanzo. Double Sniper with the Mercy swap. But they're not taking the high ground, but they're getting the eliminations anyway.
You can see that the Ana is on high ground. That's a very standard position to be in for an Ana, both in Overwatch 1 and Overwatch 2, is take that high ground and just rotate between those windows to stay alive. And you don't typically need to even touch point, even if it's last second stall. You can nano someone by the time there's a last man touching. and it can save an entire fight. Positioning is very important in this game compared to Overwatch 1.
In Overwatch 1, there was a lot more that could help you if you were positioned incorrectly, but now with the elimination of that off tank, there's almost nothing anybody can do for you if you are out of position here, as we see Diamond Dog caught out again in that snipe there. And Reaper split from his team. This is effectively a 3v5 on the point right now that the Riptides are winning.
And we do see the Nano got dropped onto Chum's Fum as well. May's trying to push forward. They're going to take a little bit of damage. Mercy's going to get hurt. May, yes, there goes the crowd as he's staying on point, and the May Blizzard, so this might be a reset.
It looks like Smelusion was just barely unable to climb that wall at first. It looks like they're committing ultimates, even though they are down one support. They do still have their Honest trade down main. We see that Orisa trying to put in some work. Chum's Fum is very weak on that Diva, just hanging on by a Orb of Harmony and a prayer. But Smelusion is looking for Diamond Dog again, is unable to find them, but Chum's Fum is out of mech anyway. Somebody get that Zenyatta. He's just on the point. He's there for your sniping. No, they will be unable to get him, and I think that might be a lost fight there.
They did take out Diamond Dog, and it does look like the Riptides are going to lock this down finally.
They got him. You got to get that Zenyatta. When they're on the point, looking at both of your snipers on the off angle, at that point, somebody's got to do something.
The whole keep your tank alive is important, but when it comes to the opposite is also true. The thing that's keeping everyone else alive still needs to die. You cannot let supports live that long, because it's important to remember that they do a lot more damage than they used to, so they can be very aggressive in comparison to how Overwatch 1 used to play. But doing what we just saw Art do is never advised for any Mercy. You don't have extra sustain when everyone's looking at you.
I almost want to believe that that was a misclick there, because they were like looking into the entire enemy team, and it would have been big if you could get that res, but there's no way you're going to get it looking into that entire team. And it looks like we do have a Sojourn. KJ has finally swapped over, except that Sojourn is way too aggro in their spawn by herself, so she will get picked off there as Widow is looking for that Lucio. Unable to find them so far.
Yeah, and we also had two coming out of spawn, so Zen and Reaper were not there either, so Sojourn being that far up was a poor decision on their part. Avian's trying to get some distance here, but takes a javelin to the face. It's going to be forced back, but this high ground positioning here, if no one's scouting it, does look like Smell did see it, but I don't think in time. And yeah, triple kill for the Death Blossom is an unfortunate reset.
There's not a whole lot you can do other than land the sleep or try to, especially because the Orisa Eat was used as the Reaper was engaging. So she didn't have it on cooldown for the beginning of the Death Blossom. We saw in the little bit at the end, she tried to eat some damage, but it was too little too late because 3 members had already been eliminated. So a great Reaper flank is going to reset that point and send the Riptides back to their spawn. Triplet. My man.
It's the Reddit Lucio mentality. It's confident too strong. Unfortunately, that's just how it is.
And now we get to see that amazing looking Orisa ult. It actually will not get a ton of value and will end up in Orisa going down because it is an ultimate, and no matter how cool it looks, that makes you very vulnerable. And especially with that Zenyatta Tranquility, it does not do the damage to go through the Tranquility now. So what's the Riptide's approach here into the Everests?
Honestly, stop trying to just force your way through this choke point. Again, there's a high ground that you can look for. They also need to be scouting because there is a Reaper chilling out behind them. Instead, they're going to take a TP, which is creative. It might work out in their favor, but that's a lot of damage going into one spot. The Dragons gets popped, might help them make some distance, but it looks like KJ is going to be doing a lot of damage.
And then, we get to see that Sojourn Railgun just a bit before the bomb is going to come out, and it looks like the Everest win that off the back of the ultimates and the Reaper flank. Spot Reaper, where's he at? He's in the hotel. Do you think and it looks like his Frog is with him as well. The Everest are looking to get super aggressive on the Riptides this fight. What do the Riptides need to do? Perhaps with a Nano.
They really need to start gathering information. It's one of the most quintessential things in this game, and it's a huge resource. And unfortunately, Smell's going to go down because they did not scout out that double flank coming out from the Lucio and the Reaper, so the turnaround took place too late. So gathering the information, getting better positioning, and then the last thing that I feel like many teams still need to work on is that ultimate tracking and being ready to counter when you can. Because it feels like when these ults are dropped, they're not ready to either use an ability to get out or use one to stop the ult from happening. And just relying on one ability is not enough because you can't always 100% expect your Ana to land asleep. So you need to have the follow-up, which would be a Javelin in this case, or even a Boop to be ready to counter that.
That Sojourn gun just sounds scary as we see it doing all of that damage in melee range. At this point, the Riptides are in final fight territory. They have to win this or they lose King's Row and the best of 3 here. And it looks like they're not getting the trades that they need to so far, even as this ball sustains on point. They're just walking into all 5 members of the Everest, and there's not a ton you can do as a solo ball here. So the Phoenix will get taken out.
And ball did spin to win as long as they could, and with that, the Riptides, unfortunately, will not be able to win this one, and Everest, as you said, will walk away with the victory in the series, correct?
And yes, in that best of 3, and then the next best of 3, because the Everest did end up winning that, the Riptides will go up against next the Tornadoes. And then the winner of that will go up against the Everest in this best of 3 matchup tonight. I am personally hoping for the Tornadoes versus Everest rematch, especially because the Tornadoes going into this week 5 Overwatch 2 Rumble, they're down Bonesaw. So the Everests winning this match 2-0 is step 1.
All right, so let's see if they can do it, if they can overcome the team. I mean, being down kind of an important player like Bonesaw can be a kind of an Achilles heel moment, but it's also important to be able to say, see, we can do it without you. No offense, Bonesaw. I do follow you on Twitter, and I do appreciate you as a player. So I'm not throwing shade, I promise. But your team needs to also back up your skill by saying they're just as skilled as you and are lucky to have you on their team. That's all I'm saying.
Because, you know, Bonesaw going at it alone can only go so far. Ultimately, if you want to increase your chances of success, you have to level up your teaming skills. We just saw that by the Everest grouping up, and even they flanked together as a group. And you can see how talented these players are, and the Esports Tower really takes the time to create teams of well-matched teammates. And I'd like to do a shout out to the coaches, and if those of you watching haven't checked out Esports Tower clubs yet, you should. It's a fast track to rank up. And just as your reaction to that last game, before we go into the break, what are your big takeaways?
Definitely check your angles.
Yeah?
I mean, there's less people to account for now. You don't have to be looking for a sneaky Reinhardt. If you only see 3 people in front of you, you know that there's 2 somewhere else and you need to look for them. I mean, it should be a dead giveaway at that point. So check your angles, utilize the high ground better, and start tracking ultimates. They're even more important to be able to counter them in this game than they were previously.
Okay, and with that, we're going to go right to a break, and hopefully some of these teams will check more of their angles.
Growing up in Idaho, we have certain rules we live by. First rule, camouflage never goes out of style. And always buckle up. Seatbelts save lives. That's a rule we can all live by.
We're going to build bridges and hospitals in a day. We're going to save families from disaster and feed those left in the cold. We invite you to join us. The next greatest generation is now.
Growing up in Riggins, we have certain rules we live by. Look both ways before crossing the street. Fishing stories get better the more you tell them. Small town life makes your life anything but small. Never work alone when you go hunting. And always buckle up. Seatbelts save lives. That's a rule we can all live by.
A rogue virus. No jobs, sky-high tuition debt. Life is trying to put our generation on the sidelines. but we refuse to just sit back and watch it pass us by. Instead, watch us fly ahead. Watch us overcome anything. Watch us rise. Watch us change our world. Watch us become the next greatest generation.
Game Pants Esports Arena. You are currently watching our Esports Tower coverage of the Week 5 Overwatch 2 Rumble. We are, again, super excited to be doing this Overwatch 2 Rumble. You just watched our first best of 3, which ended up with the Everest coming out on top against the Riptides, who now have to go up against the Tornadoes, who have been the dominant, almost indisputed champions of these Overwatch 2 Rumbles that we've done so far. I'm still your host, Colby D'Angelo Alloway, and joining me to call all of the action is Artie Nerdy Bird Rain. And tonight, you've talked about watching angles, but what does it take to do that? As you're watching the angles, you still need to pay attention to the front line. So how do you balance that?
I mean, you don't need to send a tank to go check angles anymore. I mean, previously it always was like, okay, go send the diva to take care of it, but now your diva needs to be the one on the front line. A support can check angles. I mean, you are able of sustaining yourself in a 1v1. Do not be afraid to end up doing that. And if you check an angle and you're just literally jiggle peeking a corner to see if anyone's there and you notice that there's more than one person, of course don't take a 1v2, but tell your team about it. So either everyone turns around to take care of those flankers, or you push so far forward so fast that they can't do anything and the pinch play can't come to fruition as quickly and they won't be able to take care of it. But being aware of where a team is and where players are is a huge resource. And yes, the opposite is also true, which is pulling attention. However, if that attention is pulled by one person and then everyone on that team responds and is immediately aware that you are trying to be sneaky and they take care of you, then yeah, you might have taken away a couple seconds of their push, but in the end, they're going to win out the fight because they took you and your teammate out instead, and then they're going to go take care of your front line. So it's important to understand how you're splitting resources and understand when you are giving your resource to a team in the form of, I'm going to peek this corner to see if anyone's there. Make sure you're relaying that A, you're looking, and B, there are actually people in this location, and don't just stay quiet about it.
And there are a couple of supports, just like you were mentioning. You don't want your solo tank to check these angles, but there are a couple of supports that are pretty good at doing exactly this. One of them is the Mercy, because she can just jiggle peek the angle, right? And your Mercy's not going to take the duel, obviously. But a Mercy doesn't need to be looking at her team to get value. And so that's huge in checking these angles. And the same is true for Lucio. But he might actually win the duel there.
Oh yeah, Lucio can win a duel, Zenyatta can win a duel. In Ana, if there's two sleep, one of them call your team over and then throw the anti-nade down. It's going to take care of both of them almost instantaneously. There are very few that cannot take a 1v1 or be prepared to slow down a 2v1 to get your team to come help out. And the one that obviously can't really sustain through a 2v1 is a Mercy. So you just use your Guardian Angel after you recognize there's people there, get out and have your team go take care of it. You provided the information to your team. You've done your job.
Just like peek. Oh, there's people there. Goodbye. And with that, we're not just giving this advice for these people to win. These players are also actually getting a lot of rewards here. And those rewards come in the form of scholarships. So we want to take a moment to congratulate all of the Esports Tower Club members who have graduated from the clubs and have been offered scholarships across the country. Over the last 3 months, Esports Tower Club members have received over 1.6 million in scholarship awards. These students have not only worked hard on their in-game play, but worked hard academically and have earned these scholarship opportunities. We could not be more excited and proud to see all the amazing opportunities these players are getting. So we're not just giving you this advice to get better at the game, we're doing this for the end goal of going to college, getting those scholarships, doing those amazing things. And with that, we do have Doc's keys to the game, which in Overwatch 2 is to never take a fair fight, which means take fights in unexpected places when they are unprepared and keep your tank alive. And Doc's keys to the game are presented today by Esports Tower. Score pro advice at esportstower.com. Improve your game sense, improve your team play, and improve your performance under pressure. You'll get matched with great players and professional coaches to help you rank up. So all of this is going somewhere, but where it's going most immediately is our next matchup, which will end up being the Riptides versus the Tornadoes. So we've given a lot of advice to the Riptides in particular. What do the Tornadoes need to do to come out on top and get their Everest's rematch?
I feel like it's the exact same thing, which is, utilize the high ground, make sure you're spreading out resources appropriately. And the last thing that didn't really come to fruition too much in that last game, it is both tracking ultimates and using your ultimates appropriately, because you can't drop 3 ults in a team fight anymore in this game unless you're planning on staggering out the enemy team for the next fight and a half, because there's only 5 ults now. You can't go 3 and 3 split with your ultimates. And over-ulting is a huge thing that is a problem right now as far as Overwatch 2 scrims and pugs have been experiencing thus far.
And what are some of the biggest ultimates you see overcommitted?
Definitely support ults. Double support ulting is still majority a no-no, unless, like in Ana, getting a nano and using it immediately. If you're good at Ana, you can almost get it every fight, but you got to make sure that it's actually going to give value. You just can't nano your monkey to go in and then everyone on the other team just uses Lucio's speed and gets out, because then your monkey is going to be landing and being like, okay, what do I do now?
And there's that Sojourn that you were talking about. It does not have the Pocket Mercy, but they do have the Ana. Is Nano as valuable on a Sojourn as it is with, like, say, a Nanovisor?
Oh, yes, it can be just as valuable. I mean, we've seen Lyric in the past. They're a fantastic hit scan player and projectile-based player. So if they're in line of sight, and unfortunately I would not suggest doing it in this corridor because there's so many places that they can hide, but if it's a very straight angle with not a lot of places to hide, go for it. Nano your Sojourn.
And it looks like as the monkey jump, that means the fight has started. Going in, we see his bubble being popped. Almost takes a little bit. He gets slept in the backline, but immediately woken up. But that wake up is not actually going to do a lot to save his life there. And now at this point, the Riptides can be aggressive and go in on the Tornadoes, who have been previously our undisputed champions of Overwatch 2.
They have lost both of their DPS. We did lose Arc, but losing your Lucio isn't as bad a deficit when you have a team that moves as quickly as the Riptides have right now. Mango needs to be a little careful. Their sleeps predominantly are going to have to be taking care of Spacefire, which they did earlier. But there's really nothing else that can take care of Mango so long as they, play back, because an Ana doesn't need to be in fight to add value.
And Spacefire actually is a new main tank. We see them committing to the thing. There is a trade, main tank for off support there. That is in the favor of the Riptides still here. The Tornadoes don't really have a hard end other than just getting eliminations onto the members of the Riptides, which they are doing. We don't need a main tank, they say. We're just going to get the elims.
And it is important to note that how many people you have pushing this robot, whose name is just Push Robot, unfortunately, is, yeah, it's kind of sad. It's important. It is much like Payload, which is, as long as you have 3 people on, it's moving as fast as it possibly can, but if you only have 1 person, it's going to be going the slowest, and if anyone's not touching it, it's just going to stand still and ask for assistance. Oh, no. we do hear Beat go off. Let's see if Pando's team's able to capitalize on that.
Spacefire coming in with an elimination. Spacefire is proving that this Winston is now valuable after a couple of fights where they were struggling a little bit here. Tornadoes are now up 2. Now is the time to get aggressive on those remaining 3 members, which they're doing exactly that. And you see the remaining members running back to their spawn as other people respawn. Spacefire, understandably, gonna back up from their spawn doors.
And you could see how much value that Winston bubble, both for Spacefire and for Frozen Phoenix, got. I mean, Spacefire recognized that when he got to the door and that bubble dropped, there was nothing he could do, and then when he used his own, he took care of this Lucio by himself because that bubble can absorb so much damage now.
And we did see the Nano come out. No elimination so far. The Riptides are up 1 in this fight, so the Tornadoes are kind of like reconvening back on the push spot here. Somebody better catch that Lucio out as the Blade is committed. The Tornadoes are now down 3 and are gonna lose this fight off the back of an ultimate.
Joe, that was quite spicy, if I do say so myself.
We love to see the Genji Blade, and I mean, we were talking about appropriately committing ultimates. It feels like that is the best use for a Genji Blade. Reset the team that it was previously camping your spawn. Go ahead and win the fight. Great job, Joe, for the Riptides. And actually, I do want to highlight Joe because coaches have been telling us that they've really come in as an in-game leader.
No, that's very important, even in this game. Typically, you want your main tank being the in-game lead or Lucio doing it, but I mean, Joe, if you're capable of doing what an in-game lead is supposed to do, nicely done, because you need to keep your team together. But this monkey ult is kind of eviscerating the backline right now, just gaining space, not getting any eliminations, but that space is very important.
They were able to sustain, though, and because of that, they are able to take back that space. Spacefire, who is the new main tank for the Tornadoes, is going to get taken out by Joe. Joe's looking for that elimination onto that soldier. Will end up getting it on the Sojourn. Excuse me there. That is Sojourn, and that's a little bit difficult to say there. The Tornadoes are going to have to full reset because of some amazing Genji play by Joe yet again.
Here's where things get a little bit complicated, and this is exactly the same spot that we saw this entire point flip, which is this corner here is very irksome to deal with because the defending side has an advantage at it because they get high ground access first. It's very similar to a lot of the payload and hybrid points that we see in Overwatch 1. It gives the opportunity for the turnaround to happen. We hear beat drop, we hear visor drop as well. But we're going to see a double elim, a triple from Spacefire, actually.
And it looks like these teams are relatively even. Lots of trades are coming out, so now it's up to the individual members that are left. Tornadoes has got to get, Lyric has got to get this elimination onto either Arc. They will be unable to do so as Frozen Phoenix will end up taking them out. And because of that, lost 2-on-1, it looks like the Tornadoes will finally reset after all those ultimate trades.
And you're very familiar with this idea, which is die or get out. And when you are down to just a DPS and a support, it's time to get out or die, and unfortunately I feel like that just took way too long for those two to reset for that fight, and it did allow this footing to start being gained by the other team, but they're starting to turn it around. But you can't stagger yourself that long. That's how you get fights in awkward places from the other team.
And it looks like as we go in here, the Tornadoes are at a little bit of an advantage because they're at least, they have the push bot going, but they need to engage if they truly want to win the fight and not just get bot distance. It looks like that fight is going to engage. Monkey jumping in, starts the fight. Smilusion's going to get the elimination onto Pando, but immediately get eliminated themselves for that overcommit there. The Riptides are currently down one of their main DPS. Joe is still in the fight. They might need the commit Blade if they want to win this fight, and they are so far not doing that, demonstrating a little bit of patience here, but I don't know. I think this is a fight that is very important for the Riptides to win. I think the time to commit it is now. And it looks like they're coming out with the Nano. That's what they were waiting for. That was the worth patience as Lyric is going to get picked up. It looks like he's not actually able to chase down this Lucio, who's just going to evade him. And because of that, the Riptides have been able to flip this bot. But right now, the bot is just in that awkward position we see on push sometimes where it's not actually getting anybody distance right now. It's just kind of going back and forth as the Tornadoes are going to take that back. And the Riptides, they have one more big ult. They have Visor, and they need to get more value than they did out of Nano Blade.
And you mentioned it just a little bit ago, which was Pando not getting taken out by that blade. It was a bit of a redemption for Pando Ajaxing his ult, and he dropped it in chat too, saying they call me Ajax. So not having your ult, then wasting the entire Genji blade, I'll give you back the redemption for that one. Nicely done.
And that's exactly what you want to do if you're a support. Honestly, if you can waste even like a couple of swings of a Nano Blade, you have done the most you can do without ultimates there. And it looks like this is contested. This is a very scrappy fight. This fight has gone on for more than 1 minute and 30 seconds with neither team really gaining a ton of ground. But right as I say that, it looks like the Riptides are going to flip this. The Tornadoes have got to engage now, but they don't have the members to do that.
No, they just need to maintain this high ground positioning right now and not let themselves be pushed back too far. I mean, Frozen jumping in there, and luckily they dropped down fast enough, but had they stayed in a little longer, they would have been taken out. We have Pando pushing forward too to try and help them out. Let's see if that works.
And it looks like the Tornadoes are just being taken apart here. Actually, they are going to trade. This is still even for both teams. Spacefire is still sleeping, so effectively out of the fight right now as the fight is just happening, like right on this bot as teams trade. Trades are still in the Riptide's favor right now just because they have more members to throw on the cart, but that Moira is going to be a thorn in the Riptide's side if they can't get that elimination onto its Kiva.
Yeah, the Moira you mentioned earlier, the amount of sustain that she provides, her ability to fade jump now, since they added that before we even entered the beta period for Overwatch 2, can put her out of LOS of most people very quickly, and she instantly starts regenerating her health. Like, as soon as she ducks around a corner, you can basically say she's back at full health. So it's really irksome to deal with one unless you have more than one person focusing her.
And just like that, more than one person, it actually just ended up being two, and that is the Tornadoes that are going to win map one. No, the Tornadoes are just going to win push, and then we will next go to Midtown between these two teams.
And we have Smell Illusion getting the shutdown play of the game here. I'm interested to see which one this is.
It looks like it's that fight in the corridor. Both monkey ultimates are down. Prime Soldier
yep.
76 territory
That
there.
was the Ajaxed beat right there for Pando. I'm sorry, man. It happens to all Lucio players, I promise.
We've actually seen a lot of that in like higher tier collegiate play. So like your statement of that happening to everybody on Lucio, 100% true. And it's always really unfortunate when it happens because beat is such like a fight-winning fight. But it happens to the best of us, so don't feel too bad if you're a Lucio that gets picked during your sound barrier. What do you think the Riptides need to do to turn this around against the Tornadoes? Because it actually didn't feel like they got flanked nearly as much as they did on Kings Row.
I feel like they did actually a great job on this one. Sometimes, you know, the cards just aren't dealt in your favor, and understanding, like, having tempo control is really important, but going too aggressive can also be a bad thing, and I feel like that's what started happening is they were getting aggressive when they didn't have the resource to follow up that aggressiveness. So let's see if they clean that up in this next game.
And their comp gives you a lot of ability to be aggressive. They definitely are going for a high damage comp. If Spacefire jumps into that, that's going to be really unfortunate because that's his one movement ability out. So Monkey will have to be careful and will not actually be able to take space for his team against this Bastion Reaper Orisa without them getting an elimination first here on Midtown.
Well, it's a little different, though, because Spacefire, as opposed to having a DPS go in with them, I'm pretty sure we're going to see Kiba and Pando jumping in with Spacefire doing damage and healing, and that amount of sustain can be really disgusting to have to go up against. They're going to have to either pick a support or pick a DPS, and hopefully they don't immediately go after Smell, because Smell won't go down very quickly, but the Reaper, if you turn on him, can be eliminated, or if you force Wraith first and then jump onto them. So it's going to come to the timing of seeing a ability get used and then capitalizing on that. But instead, they're going to jump immediately to point, allow their DPS to spread out and gain positioning over the other team.
And it does look like they have that high ground, just like we were talking about. And just like you were talking about, Pando and Spacefire are going to hard engage onto this Baptiste and Smell Illusion on the Bastion. It looks like things are not going... Things are going to go the way of the Tornadoes there as Pando and Spacefire both get some eliminations, but not onto the Bastion. They saw that Baptiste and immediately switch target focuses, as you should. Spacefire is just on a rampage. I was a little bit worried about them on the Monkey, but they're actually putting in a huge amount of work, especially because the Riptides were split and not all of that damage was together.
It's okay to be split, especially on this one, because there is two strategies, which is either overcome train and then go to point, or just go straight to point. And unfortunately, by having two people stuck inside train and out of all LOS of your team, they basically, you can't give them value and they can't give you value. So they're going to get deleted, and that's just basically being 100% down two. So if you're on defense, you need to pick the right location. You can't be split, but offensive players can be split.
And as we see here, Pando getting split on that Soldier there just boops him all the way into the back line there. And now this has just turned into kind of a nasty fight on the point here as both teams are trading. It will go in the favor of the Tornadoes. At this point, do you think the Soldier is going to be able to get them more value than the Bastion?
I do think so. I mean, yes, Bastion is fun, especially because he has turret formation at will almost now, except for it just has a minor cooldown. But he still is a very kind of stuck out type of hero. I mean, the positioning is very important on every point that we have discussed thus far, and it stays true here. And you can't play Protect the President anymore with this because Bastion doesn't just stay in one spot. Yep. It makes you a very easy target, so swapping off in favor of the Soldier for more mobility because of the dive that's coming out from the other side is very advantageous.
Do you think there are other swaps that need to come out as this fight comes in?
I don't think they need this swap, but taking better positioning here would be beneficial. It seems like they're just hopeful, like hitting a Q and hoping it works, but unfortunately we do see that Prefix didn't get a whole lot of damage there, but there is Frozen dropping their ult. We'll find Lyric in the process. And they are going to manage to stagger out a majority of the tornadoes right here, which is enough because you mentioned it earlier, scrappy fights. That's what it feels like Overwatch 2 is. And that's what you want.
Scrappy fights and hunting people down. I mean, so much more of the map gets used in Overwatch 2 compared to Overwatch 1 because everybody's flanking and you need to like play like Minesweeper almost to like find all of those people that are flanking because fights are just split. The Lyric is going to get that elimination onto Arc, which enables the Tornadoes to go in and take a lot of space, but Frozen Phoenix doesn't want to give this up, even walking forward with their own Orisa, and with that Death Blossom in your backline, that fight has been flipped in the favor of the Riptides. So something tricky will need to come out if the Tornadoes want to win this and earn the right to push card again.
I'm going to be completely honest, that was some incredible tension taking by the Orisa there to allow the Reaper to get in. That's the type of teamwork we need to see more of, but this Monkey got a little too aggressive.
And that's what I was worried about in the beginning, jumping in with no support, just like 5 people and getting instantly eliminated, which we did end up seeing. But that's very much not been the entirety of Spacefire's experience on Monkey, because actually they've been having a pretty good time as long as their teammates follow them up. So on the approach for the Tornadoes here, what do they need to do?
Honestly, I feel like Spacefire needs to start soft engaging a little bit more, not using their bubble as soon as they engage. Make a soft engage without it first, force out the abilities, and then have someone else go in and claim a little bit more space, and then you finally jump in with that bubble. It's staggering those abilities a bit more to make more of an advantageous move for your team. As we see Frozen take out 2, and Monkey's going to drop that Primal pretty even so far. Prefix is actually going to choose to swap off Soldier.
They are effectively down 3 there when the Primal was popped, so I actually think that's a little bit of an overcommit of an ultimate to a lost fight. Frozen Phoenix, it feels like, is the biggest barrier the Tornadoes are facing right now. What is the biggest Orisa counter? Even as we see these snipers on high ground, kind of like they can't even do anything against Frozen Phoenix with or without that Orisa shield.
So you've got a couple of options. Winston typically is something that you can do against an Orisa, but the Winston's not shake it out and work it out right now. And so if you're looking, we've got Mango on the Moira, so there's a sustain through the orbs. You've got Lucio and then Reaper Soldier. And one of the biggest things you can do to take care of almost all of those abilities is actually a D.Va. But instead they're going to decide to go 50-50 on the Orisa and take a fight here in corridor down ultimates. That could be a problem.
And it looks like, though, even though they are down ultimates, no eliminations have come out so far as the Tornadoes are trying to get aggressive. They're still sustaining. No eliminations have come out yet. Actually, Arc and Prefix are going to trade. Frozen Phoenix is the first one down, so the Tornadoes do have the opportunity to push this as they still have their main tank, but they don't have that Lucio speed to really get them in. This Mango's going to go ahead and take that down. Whoever wins this hit scan duel at the side, I think, is going to determine this team fight. And it looks like they're just going to soft reset there as the Lucio comes out. Spacefire is finally eliminated, which I think is a fight end for the Tornadoes.
We do also have attack visor coming online for Smell here. They might be able to pick up one. Instead, Mango's going to take out Lyric. I mean, we're going to call this a zoning ultimate, and in a game that's like how Overwatch is currently playing, which is an arena shooter, using something to zone out people when there's 30 seconds left is huge.
Zoning visor gives you a little bit of space here, as now the Tornadoes have to think about their next approach. What should they do?
I mean, they're forcing people off high ground, which is huge, but they need to start gaining a footing here. Get 1 person or 2 people on this payload and have the rest go clear out high ground. Instead, they've just been trying to take the high ground fights consistently, and they're throwing themselves in like a spear, and you don't want to do that. You want to take a 2-prong approach and try to pinch people off as opposed to all the damage being funneled in one spot.
Because Overwatch 2 is a much more split game. You can do splits like that. You don't need everybody on the card. And this is very reminiscent of Gibraltar, where you have the high ground and the low ground. And on Gibraltar, if you win the high ground fight, you essentially get to push the cart. But the Tornadoes so far haven't been winning that high ground fight, as they're going to get picked off on this cart in overtime. And at this point, I don't even think Spacefire can get there.
Well, it's just like Gibraltar, though, where it takes so long for people to get down onto that payload that if your team decides to put everyone on it and just get it through that underneath corridor, they would not have taken a lot of damage and could have gotten it out of that really gross area to be taking fights and having to balance between high and low ground.
Space.
If they just decided, okay, let's put everyone on payload real fast and get it out of this underneath area and get it moving, or put 1 person down there and just try to take attention on the high ground as opposed to committing to a fight on the high ground.
And we do see a little bit coming out in the chat there, and we see Space on that on that monkey and on that Orisa. It felt like they got a lot more value on that monkey as opposed to the Orisa. Do you think, you mentioned D.Va, what do you think D.Va would bring specifically to space?
I mean, taking abilities away from the other team, because everyone is guilty of when they see a tank coming at them or even a DPS of throwing as many abilities out as they possibly can. And most of these abilities can be eaten by a D.Va. So there goes most of the util from anybody. And if they're not feeling keen on the D.Va, go to the Doomfist. I mean, yes, his absorb only knocks down, I believe, 50% of the damage, but it does give you then a punch that does way more damage if you absorb enough. So using your own util to take away multiple of the other team can be very huge. So we'll have to wait and see if they're going to stick with the Orisa and just use Spear Spin, or if they're going to swap to something a little bit more mobile. I mean, Orisa v. Orisa is fine, but it comes down to where the damage is being landed by your team.
It looks like the Tornadoes are going for another high ground hold, except instead of a Bastion, they have a Junkrat, which again, another high damage comp. But the Riptides so far aren't playing grouped up enough for that Junkrat to get a ton of value, even as he spams it in. Kiba, however, is going to get an elimination on the Smellusion.
And I didn't talk about it earlier, but Junkrat for some reason is disgustingly viable despite his trap being nerfed a bit, because it doesn't do a whole lot of damage and it actually doesn't hold you in one spot. It kind of anchors you and slows you down. But as you can see here, he gets a disgusting amount of value if you know where to land your landmines. And they actually pick up, I believe, assisted with 3 out of those 5 kills on the point.
And especially when they're all coming through that building there, I mean, that's where Junkrat does his best. I mean, in this train where it's enclosed, but also in that building on point where it's enclosed. So I actually do think, though Junkrat is somewhat of a niche pick, I think, in Overwatch 2, this is definitely one of his niches that he's looking for.
Yeah, and anyone that's wondering, yes, we are playing pre-patch. That's why the Junkrat's able to get on top of the train. If you're trying to mimic what we do see Prefix doing here, getting on top of it, you can't do that anymore. It has been patched. Just a heads up.
And there was a little bit of a discrepancy with whether or not that train is a viable option to go into here, as they're just going to hard commit into that train, but they can't actually do anything against that Junkrat, so that's just a lot of damage, especially with that Zenyatta Discord there. The Tornadoes are just picking them off in that train before the Riptides can even engage, and I think that's fight over.
It most definitely is. We got Prefix jumping over, doing a lot of damage again, picking up a 3-piece for themselves. I think pushing through train is just not the strategy here, and they need to swap things up just a little bit and stop going all in one spot in one conga line.
And I do think, as you can see, the Junkrat is repeatedly jumping back over that train. It gives him a lot of mobility here that they won't necessarily have in future patches of this train. And even like underground, the Tornadoes have a very dominating hold. What specific strategy do you think would break this, other than, I mean, not going through the train?
Going with a more mobile comp, I mean, they're borderline mirrored here, except for, actually, no, never mind, I am dumb. They are mirrored on the tank front, but if you're going to stop trying to push through train, A, and B, honestly, at this point, because the Junkrat, all of the damage from a Junk can be eaten by a D.Va, or can be eaten by an Orisa. Orisa needs to be using Spear Spin at the right time. See, you can't get up here anymore. Orisa needs to be using Spear Spin at the right time, or they need to be swapping to a D.Va to take away a lot of the value that Prefix provides, and just send a D.Va after them to take care of them. However, Prefix is going to finally go down to Reaper, but the Total Mayhem after fire will take out Mango.
And taking down Mango is a worthy trade, especially if you're a Junkrat. I think that will be the end of their .1 hold, though, just because you lose that Junkrat and you lose that hold. And so now the Riptides, where do you think the Tornadoes' next hold should be?
They are already in position to do that hold, which is this high ground. I mean, they're going to pull a lot of attention from up here, and so long as they can start getting picks prior to this payload getting underneath them, they're going to be in a nice position to maintain a lot of time up here. However, Pando going down immediately before the fight's even fully instigated is going to be a problem, because that Discord orb does so much for the team.
But that's both supports down on Prefix, so I actually think the Tornadoes do get to hold this. I think the Visor was a little bit of an overcommit, especially with the Orisa 2v1 in the room there. I don't know if we needed that, but it was a nice bit. The Visor wasn't committed, excuse me. Good.
I thought it was too.
Good then that he didn't there against that Orisa, especially with his own Orisa there. And now this is obviously a very difficult position to push. And like you said, you could theoretically just get everybody on cart and go it through low ground, but the cart has to move forward a little bit more. And the Riptides still have yet to knock the Tornadoes off of their high ground.
And we have Space actually positioning themselves quite far forward, so they're even going to go in front of that high ground. You see Anna's on the opposite high ground on one of those patio awnings. So they are taking as much of this resource of the high grounds as physically possible for their team. We hear Attack Visor go out, and there goes the ultimate from Marisa as well. Arc will go down. I think Moira, yes, Mango's going to go down. The Lyric does get taken out by Joe, but they're already up by 1. Spacefire's trying to 1v1. They're at low health, though. Frozen's low health, too. Both of them are so low.
That was quite the Orisa duel. Joe is going to come in and get the final elimination onto Spacefire there. The Tornadoes, their high ground hold has been broken here. But they do still have the soldier there, so the Riptides can't quite approach and be as aggressive as they want, but they get cart push. The Tornadoes have one last fight. What do they need to do?
Honestly, I feel like exactly what Smillusion's doing right now, which is just peppering damage into all these corridors where someone could be possibly positioning themselves to try and get to pre-fight position. And they already took care of one. Joe's going to find another. They'll be downed by Pando shortly thereafter, but that trade's definitely worth it. However, yeah, the Transcendence is going to come out, but it's going to be a little, too late.
And the Riptides are end up going to take that. So this is now 1-1 between these two teams. The Tornadoes have one and the Riptides have one. So this will all be determined by nap number 3, which will end up being Dorado. How do the strategies differ in Dorado for what we've seen in Overwatch 1?
They're not super different. I mean, there's a little bit more room for creativity. You're not going to see any sort of double bubble action anymore, but definitely taking advantage of getting people off the high ground is important here, but also you can just drop someone on cart and then go let everyone else handle high ground, and you just chill out there. I mean, you don't feel like you're adding value, but you're doing the most important thing, which is push the payload. And you'll just watch as your team kind of like circles around the high ground, and then they're over, you know, on the right side where that mega pack is, down in like that hole in the ground area, and you'll just chill out on payload, and as it gets past Archway, your team just kind of slowly pushes the defending team towards the payload, and then you pinch them off. That's kind of the main strat that I've seen used on Dorado.
And so, as we get into this final map in these two teams tied 1-1 in the best of 3, what do you think the Tornadoes need to clean up? Because previously, they've been the almost undisputed champions after the Everest had their time, the Tornadoes have had their time. What do they need to clean up to get back into that champion spot?
This is going to sound very toxic, and I by no means mean for it to be, but stop dying before a full fight starts.
Position better,
yes,
says Nerdy Bird.
Be aware of where you're standing, and if someone can get damage on you, don't stand there.
And Dorado, it is honestly, it's a little bit shocking, just like with Kings Row, to see it during the day. But I actually am a really big fan of this Sunset Dorado because I feel like the warm color palette, Dorado already kind of has that on these outside everything, and so I feel like it just looks beautiful.
Yeah, I'll give that one to you. Dorado's one of the few that didn't suffer from everything looking orange in the daylight, so it actually does pay off on this one. The Riptides are choosing to go with the Sombra on this one, and it's going to be interesting because that can work out in their favor. However, defense has a lot more opportunities to spread out rather than an offensive team here. We'll have to see how they use that EMP when they eventually get it online.
And that EMP is a lot harder to charge, partially because of the Sombra changes, but also because these fights are no longer really team fights. They're much longer, more scrappy fights. As we see, the Tornadoes are just kind of dropping onto the Riptides, who can't really do anything because they don't have a ton of high ground control right now.
We do see Pando pick one up for themselves, Lyric found one, and I do believe one more was picked up right before that. So defense, yeah, they're just controlling high ground. Right now, honestly, trying to just push a little bit, but putting one person in charge of that push after your team is pushed forward away from payload is what you need to be looking for here. And honestly, you may just want to go coast and go up to the high ground as opposed to trying to spear everything forward through this initial choke archway.
And they are just trying to go for the low ground. What are some specific targets you are looking for them to dive, as it looks like the Tornadoes are going to win that fight in pretty dominating fashion?
The Riptides need to be looking for this Ana, and so hopefully that's what Smell is doing right now, is trying to just go find this Ana's location as opposed to actually possibly landing a hack or taking care of anyone themselves. To find the Ana's location, and your team should either be rotating underneath or going coastline to do this sort of damage as opposed to jumping immediately in, because you might lose LOS on your supports, and I do believe that's exactly what we just saw happen as Attack Visor gets popped by Lyric.
And it looks like the defenders are just making fantastic use of this high ground. Though that was a good push. They did attempt to do exactly what you were talking about on that Sombra. Smillusion really made a good effort there, but they just got out-ulted, so it'd be really nice to see them do that, I mean, a second time, where now they don't have the Attack Visor.
And we already see that the defenders are positioned back on top of this Red House high ground. Reaper using both Shadow Step and Wraith back-to-back. That's a mistake that should not have been made. Smell needed to have communicated that there's 2 people already up there, as opposed to you forcing out both of your abilities to try and see if you could get up there. That comes down to keeping your comms open and listening to one another. Now, again, this is just choosing a different rotation. Right now, they're all rotating through main. Go left side and jump on top of them from there, as opposed to just walking into the trap that they have here right in front of the payload.
That was a pretty big hack onto that monkey, preventing them from hard engaging, but nobody on their team was able to engage. As Prefix is going to eliminate Joe, who once again just tried to TP up on the Reaper high ground. It would be nice if the attackers all did that together instead of just individually, because I'm seeing a lot of good individual things that could potentially win a fight, but nobody's there to capitalize on that.
You really can only get away with doing that sort of stuff if you're not playing against a 5-stack. And in this case, you are. So the comms are there. You need to respect the fact that someone's going to call you out and be ready to fall back on something else. And when you have to already expel both abilities for your movement to do that, it's just not worth it. We see Fulcrum actually swapping over to the Orisa. Not sure how much value that's going to provide, because they're not going to be able to do anything on the high ground now for their team, as they do have EMP, but I'm not sure if it's going to be enough.
And it lands onto onto 2 members of the Tornadoes, both their Genji and their Monkey, so now is the time to engage. But it doesn't land on the Lyric, however, and that attack visor is going to come out right from the high ground. It's like visoring fish in a barrel. They were all there, and there was nothing that they could have done to stop you, and now that Sombra is going to get caught out and probably eliminate. Yeah, I was going to be disappointed if Lyric wasn't able to follow up on that.
And now we've got a Moira swap coming out for the side of the Riptides. Prefix still has ult, as does Panda. We're probably going to see both of them popped at different times here, because we've already seen Prefix get value off the dry Genji blades. They don't need anything, but they need to be aware that Arc has beat online. And there we go again with the Reaper using both abilities to get to high ground and getting very low as Smellusion goes down.
Poor Joe. Joe is just having an unfortunate time on that Reaper, and you have to think at some point maybe a swap should have came out, but overtime is probably too late to fix those swapping mistakes here. And it looks like Tornado's phenomenal first point hold on Dorado.
I would have loved to have seen Joe swap over to the Cassidy. I know everyone's like, well, there's no CC in the game, Cassidy isn't worth it anymore, but actually, if you pepper just a tiny bit of damage onto a squishy and then land the sticky grenade onto them, they're instantaneously deleted. And Monkey can't do anything besides using a bubble, so if bubble goes down or you're inside of it and you landed on that Genji would have been gone. So I understand he's not as fun as he used to be, but Cassie is still very viable.
And especially shooting from the low ground onto the high ground is a little bit difficult as the Cassidy, but still essentially doable, right? And there are lots of different routes you can take on Cassidy to get to that high ground. You just need to coordinate it with your tanks so that you're not there in the position that Joe quite often found themselves in on the high ground, but by yourself, so forced to immediately give it up. I will say, I think Smellusion on the Ashe, I think that's going to be a good defense here, especially with Arc on that Mercy. What are your thoughts on the Ashe Mercy as we go into Overwatch 2? Because it was almost oppressive on certain maps in Overwatch 1.
Ashe Mercy can still be extremely powerful if used at the proper times, especially when there's already high ground control here, because you already have that positioning in your favor. It can be great, but it comes down to escapability then if a dive is being brought out by the Tornadoes. We'll have to see if they choose to go with that, because they do have Spacefire and Prefix, 2 people plus Pando, so all 3 of them diving onto an Ashe Mercy. If Ashe doesn't use Coach Gun at the right time to either push Spacefire back and themselves back, they and their Mercy will be gone.
And Joe is also there, so if the Spacefire on the Monkey does dive, that's going to be a little bit unfortunate, especially if they do it themselves. Pando is going to get that res. Kind of unfortunate that their Echo doesn't have that support immediately. We see Spacefire go in, and that is the beginning of the fight. And Kiba actually will pick up Mango. The Tornadoes are just tearing into the Riptides before the Ashe Mercy could even get any eliminations or value whatsoever.
There was actually a huge dynamite there, but unfortunately the pushback from the enemy team was just too much for it to be capitalized on right away. And we got Lyric already pushing themselves up onto the high ground. And right there,
wow,
not even a full fight goes down, and the game is over, and Riptides will walk away with another victory.
And because of that, the Tornadoes actually are the ones that ended up with that victory, their slight visual glitch. Lyric is going to get the player of the game. This is probably one of their many visors from high ground onto low ground. We see Joe just, oh, that feels real bad. And especially circumventing that EMP. How did that not land on the Lyric, the one member that they were really trying to land it on here? And they just backed just barely out of range of that EMP, and because of that, the Tornadoes are going to take that. So we are getting the Everest Tornadoes rematch that, I mean, we've been hoping for ever since they became rivals when the Tornadoes first became a team. But the Tornadoes are going to struggle if they go against the Everest as they are right now. What do the Tornadoes need to clean up going into this final best of 3 for tonight?
It's still going to be holding true with the taking care of not taking damage when you don't need to. And, I mean, they did a fantastic job on this last one, but if they are in poor positioning pre-fight, it's going to be capitalized on. And it goes down to respecting the enemy team and being aware that they can take advantage of your poor positioning. So let's hope that doesn't happen, but it still might.
And if you want to be seen by expert college recruiters, talk directly to esports industry insiders like pro athletes and team general managers and game producers, join the Esports Tower Club. Esports Tower players get insider access to industry insights, and with our featured rumbles, recruiters are taking notice too. It's a great way to score exposure if you're looking to start your path to pro or land a collegiate scholarship. And just like we talked about, lots of collegiate scholarships are being given here because of these Esports Tower rumbles and because of these players that do really, really well. So, and again, I feel the need to mention what specifically, in relation to not having Bonesaw, who has been one of their primary members, how can the Tornadoes kind of like make up for what Bonesaw previously brought to the team?
Definitely doing damage together is going to be huge because Bonesaw was a massive damage dealer and they could definitely take a 1v1 fight no problem. However, without that person who's confident on, you know, taking care of someone by themselves, you need to make sure that you're splitting your resources in a manner that is beneficial to your team and not wasting time doing something that isn't beneficial. Because in a lot of cases, a 1v1, if you're not confident as a DPS player or even as a support, it's not worth taking it because either you're going to go down or it's just going to be a whole wasted time between you and that other player. Because if they call for backup and someone comes and helps them out and you lose, you just expelled so much time trying to do that 1v1. So understand where you're committing your resources, and if there is someone who has the confidence to be an in-game lead, make sure you're listening to that in-game lead and taking care of who they're calling out.
And in-game leads are very, very important, and that gives you that target focus that you're needed for. And before we get into the Tornado versus Everest grudge match that I am, for one, super hyped to go against, just because these two teams have been very back and forth, and now might be the time for the Everest to finally kind of like usurp the Tornadoes here. All of that after this break.
A rogue virus. No jobs. Sky-high tuition debt. Life is trying to put our generation on the sidelines. But we refuse to just sit back and watch it pass us by. Instead, watch us fly ahead. Watch us overcome anything. Watch us rise. Watch us change our world. Watch us become the next greatest generation.
Growing up in Idaho, we have certain rules we live by. First rule, camouflage never goes out of style. And always buckle up. Seatbelts save lives. That's a rule we can all live by. Growing up in Riggins, we have certain rules we live by. Look both ways before crossing the street. Fishing stories get better the more you tell them. Small town life makes your life anything but small. Never work alone when you go hunting. And always buckle up. Seatbelts save lives. That's a rule we can all live by.
bridges and hospitals in a day. We're going to save families from disaster and feed those left in the cold. We invite you to join us. The next greatest generation is now.
Esports Arena. You are watching our Week 5 Overwatch 2 Rumble. Right now, we just saw the Tornadoes pick up a victory against the Riptides. And so now, because of this, we get our final best of 3 for tonight will end up being the Tornadoes versus the Everests. These two teams have been rivals since the creation of Tornadoes because some of the Everest previous members have been moved over onto now the Tornadoes. I'm still your host, Colby D'Angelo Alloway, and joining me to call all of the action is Artie Nerdy Bird Rain. And tonight, it's very, very exciting because not only do we get to cast on Overwatch 2 and get to do all of these exciting things there and see new maps like Midtown, which we've seen a good deal of tonight, and Coliseum, but we also get to see the R2 Esports Tower powerhouse teams. Before it was the Tornadoes, it was the Everests for oppressive, 7 weeks almost. There was nothing anybody could do to stop the Everests, and then the teams got mixed up. And now it has been the Tornadoes that have been dominating, especially our Overwatch 2 Scrim server rumbles, but now this second Overwatch 2 rumble. And I asked you about it a little bit before the break, but can you remind us what the Tornadoes need to do to make up for the lack of one of their stronger players, which was Bonesaw?
So definitely making sure that they're focus firing when they have an in-game lead. So hopefully there's someone who is confident in their comm ability and also their just overall tracking and skill ability as a player to take that in-game lead role. And if you're not the person doing it and there is someone doing it, you need to make sure that you're listening to them. Yes. Because if you're wasting your time pitting fire on someone who's never going to go down, don't do it. And also, if you're going to be taking a 1v1, make sure that you're going to take care of it and clean it up, or tell your team that it's about to happen so that either A, you get backup, or they tell you to back out and come to the front line if the resources for the other team are getting split too much because that 1v1 is about to take place.
And especially because Overwatch 2 is such a split game, it's much more viable now to run off as a DPS and take the 1v1. You just need to communicate that because the other 4 members of your team are relying on you unless you communicate otherwise. And if you win the 1v1, that's great. But if you're unable to pick up the Lucio or something like that, you can't just spend 30 seconds chasing after them. You need to either get the elimination quickly or you need to get back to the rest of your team so that someone can help you. And going into that, we're going to compare that advice to Doc's keys to the game, which we do have an updated Overwatch 2 version, which is to never take a fair fight, which means take fights in unexpected places when they're unprepared and keep your tank alive. And Doc's keys to the game are presented today by Esports Tower. Score pro advice at esportstower.com. Improve your game sense, improve your team play, and improve your performance under pressure. You'll get matched with great players and professional coaches to help you rank up. And so we touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but it's in Doc's keys to the game, so bears a little bit more mentioning. How do you keep your solo tank alive?
I mean, as the support of an Ana or a Moira, it's not so much the Mercy because your job is still basically taking care of your DPS, maybe providing a little bit of help to your main tank, but your supports predominantly need to make sure they're keeping their tank in their LOS and communicating to that tank when they can't see them or when they're going in and you're not even there. Because there's a lot of times where tanks will go in and just the communication's not where it needs to be, and they're not aware that their main DPS, their main support's down, so they're not going to get the healing that they need. And that also comes down to a main tank calling their engages and making sure people are set up in positions that they can assist. Your DPS doesn't necessarily need to be right next to you on an engage, but they need to be able to get value while you're doing that engage, either doing damage to people who are looking at you as the tank, or in more advantageous cases, doing damage on the support that would be keeping the front line of the enemy team alive.
And with that advice, now we know how to keep our main tank alive. We're going to go ahead and get right into game, which again end is the Everest versus the Tornadoes. This is the match I personally have been waiting all night for because I just love to see these two teams go at it because there's a lot of history there and there's a lot of players. And actually, I am told that before this, the Everest have really been trying this week to set up to take the victory off of the Tornadoes. The Everest are trying to create the perfect storm here. And with Bonesaw out of commission for this week's Rumble, now might be the time. I mean, there's no time like the present, and the Everest are really looking to capitalize on this. What do you expect to see for some team comps on this new push map that we're seeing right now?
Well, I'm not surprised about what we do actually see coming online, which is Diamond Dog actually pulling off, going away from that support role onto their comfort role, which is that tank. They're going to be on the Orisa. We have Spacefire yet again going with the Winston. I'm honestly genuinely surprised we have not seen a Doomfist thus far because Doomfist with Moira Lucio can be extremely oppressive. However, both these lines of DPS have the ability to do a lot of flanking, and they have strong get-out ability with Sojourn with her slide jump, and Soldier just being able to use their shift ability and run out. That can do a lot. But they have to make sure that they're not going to be getting dove on and completely taken out. So relying on your own get-out abilities and timing them properly is going to be important here. Don't stay in one area too long.
And it looks like that Sojourn is already going to try to get that off angle with that Moira there. The Monkey has dove it. That is the start of the fight here. Chipsbomb and Triple are going to go down to Pando on that barrel Reddit Lucio here. And that's the Tornadoes up now just one because Pando gets taken on and Spacefire immediately. Now they're still up one as those red remaining trades come back. Now up two. Now is the time for the Tornadoes to push, mostly because the Everest don't have anybody else to throw on cart right now.
New Queen Street is actually very interesting because of how many corridors lead back to main here. You can see Prefix immediately capitalizing on that. Just trying to get some damage and coming back to the push point can do a lot. Typically, you want to have your team push up around this corner immediately. If you see that there isn't anyone going into these shops on your right-hand side, which is what was happening, instead we're going to Prefix go on a full flank, but you do see, again, they have the ability to get out right here, and in the process, they'll find the Soldier, too.
And because of that, we see that Sojourn's pull ability is so oppressive. You just get locked in place as a Soldier, and he couldn't even turn in time before Prefix just eliminated that hard on that Sojourn. So actually, it looks like in the Battle of the Hit Scans right now, Prefix on the Sojourn is getting more value than either of the Soldiers, for now.
And the staggering is just coming out really hard against the Everest, but Prefix did eventually have Avian turn on them with a little help from Moira, so they do go down. But right now, it looks like Tornadoes are just trying to regain a little bit of footing as the forward push is coming into them. Lyric and Spacefire and Pando both find one, as will Kiva. So 3 go down for the side of the Everest as this barrier just keeps going forward.
The Everest hard engaged in that fight because they were up one, but they weren't prepared for the Tornadoes to get aggressive back. I think that was they won that fight off the value of target focusing here.
Let's see if they can do that again. Right now, we're coming in with a lot of ultimates for both sides. Ideally, we want to see that Lucio ult still used defensively. A lot of teams are guilty of using it offensively here when they don't need to. Triplet's going to take one, and Triple will go down shortly there after that co.
And it looks like there's some trades coming out on both teams. The trades continue, but at this point, both teams are running out of members. And at this point, the Tornadoes still have their Moira. So they have sustained for their individual members that are here. So the Tornadoes are slowly but surely going to sustain through this fight and actually end up just winning.
That Moira, the amount of sustain that she has by herself is honestly grotesque. Waiting for a nerf to happen on her, whether or not that does come to fruition, I don't know. As a Moira player, I love her as is, but I understand that she's a bit too oppressive now. Lucio got a nerf. Let's see if she's next. Right now, though, Tornadoes, they are just heaping pace right now and staying alive, but unfortunately, they do lose Pando there, so that might be enough for things to turn around in Everest's favor.
Absolutely, says Avian, as they get that elimination there, and because of where this bot is pushing right around the corner, the Tornadoes are forced to walk right into the Everest, and the Everest, I think, had a better high ground control that fight, and they were able to get the eliminations, and especially Avian on that Sojourn from the high ground. Getting those eliminations was huge for them that fight. What do the Tornadoes need to do to retake this?
Honestly, they need to pick a squishy and go after them, and right now they have their eyes set on Avian as well as Pando, which might be enough. We hear the beat go off to sustain during this full engage. Railgun's not even popped yet for Avian, and they've already taken out one. Monkey gets really low, but Avian themselves is getting very low as you see Coalescence get popped.
So there's those trades again. Both Moiras are still in the fight. However, the Tornadoes are down Spacefire, which is their main tank. So they will have some difficulty kind of like engaging. They don't have somebody to soak up all of that damage. So they're backing up, giving a lot of space. And now that Moira has gone down, I think that's the end of the fight for the Tornadoes.
We do have Lyric going into a 1v1 here, but then the Soldier's there to follow up. Lyric, it's time to get out of this. And that was just another case of staying in too long. There was a coastline that was nice and ready for you over there that you could have jumped off of. I know it's not as common for DPS to have to deal with, but if you're the last man standing and you get that far staggered, you need to take a play out of the Diva's Handbook, and that is just go for the coastline and int yourself off. Do not stay in these fights that long, because now your team has to go in a man down on this engage.
The Tornadoes are using ultimates to try to compensate for that lack. No eliminations have come out so far. The Everests are looking for their in to this fight, and that might just be it with that elimination on the Lyric as we go in here. Prefix has got to do some big cheeky Sojourn play, I think, from the backline. No, they're just going to get out, which I think is wise for the Tornadoes as they are just torn apart, showing why sometimes you need to int yourself off the ledge. Make sure your team has full team.
Lyric is going to go for 1v1 against Prefix. Well, sorry, Lyric took out Avian there, and Avian also found Prefix. So there was a slight trade, but right now, Tornadoes, they are hurting a little bit. But luckily for them, they have pushed that barrier quite far. And unfortunately, even for push, if you get the first to push that bot, typically you're the one that's going to win out. But we did see quite the flip last time. Let's see if that holds true here. Lyric has already gone down to triplet, though.
And being down to DPS is much more preferable than being down, say, your Moira. And it looks like that Moira is going to be taken weak in the back there. KJ, that is both soldiers down for both teams, and now only one Sojourn in the fight right now. That's a lot of damage that has been taken out of this fight, most of which will be able to Moira sustain. No, Kiva's going to go down to Avian, but it looks like the rest of the Tornadoes are going to... Kiva was the price, and usually you don't want your Moira to be the price, but I think that's a one fight.
But for right now, Tornadoes aren't gaining any footing. They're still escorting this robot back, and they're choosing to go with the standard strat of only sticking one person on it, the rest of them gaining positioning spots here. Lyric's going to go from one side, and it does look like Prefix is going to take the far left as well. Lyric is now going to rotate back, realizing they're a little bit too far to do much. But the back line is going to come through and start looking to pinch off everyone here at this bot. They've already taken out two.
And because of that coalescence, they will be able to sustain on the side of the Tornadoes. And now they're just going to go ahead and win that fight before the Tornadoes can even gain any ground. That bot is just walking his happy little self all the way back.
Let's hope that they can actually stay on this bot. A lot of teams will get a little bit too a little overzealous in these fights at these corners and walk away from the bot so the bot doesn't move whatsoever. And it's very important to capitalize when you don't have a fight happening on this bot to take that payload, well, take that push as much as you can.
Moira's going to go down first to Kiva. That is the Kiva winning the battle of the Moiras. Their Tornadoes are at a massive advantage here. Lyric is the price. They're just going to go in and take all the space they possibly can. But now that you've won the fight, you need to get some members back on payload. And it looks like they're resetting to do exactly that.
Keeping two on. Oh, no, they're going to go with 2 and 3, alternating a little bit here. This could be a little bit of a bad idea considering they're not scouting for positioning. You do see a Moira trying to be a little cheeky and sneak up behind. Hopefully they don't do that by themselves because, as you mentioned, losing Moira is not something you want to deal with before fight starts.
And it looks like she is main just by the direction of that orb here as the monkey goes in. That is the official beginning of the fight here. Orisa ultimate will not end up landing on anybody, and Diamond Dog is in a very difficult position here. They will get healed up and sustained by their Moira, who's able to just get there in the nick of time. Now will Kiva be able to do that for their monkey? They absolutely will. Moiras are carrying the fight right now, as at this point the Everests are down 4 members.
We saw Diamond Dog do it, which is that Orisa ult Terra Surge. It does more damage the longer you hold it, but it does not hold people in for the entire duration, and so unfortunately it got no value for Diamond Dog there by holding it that long. Sometimes it's better to just pull them in, hold it for a couple of seconds, and then drop it, and just have your team follow up on whoever is the weakest after that happens. As we see Lyric getting another play of the game.
And because you're usually not going to get the 6-man ultimates, right? And so waiting that long is just committing to something that's not really going to work out, which isn't what you're looking for here. And though Lyric did get the play of the game here, I would say that that was everybody there. Though Lyric started it off in a dominating fashion, that is map 1 of New Queen Street going over. And now at this point, we're going to Kings Row. What strategies do you think will work there?
If you're on defense, control the high grounds, please. I am so sad seeing so many people position on low grounds here, especially if you don't have a Mei, because that's like the only real form of like blockading that you get now in this game, unless you have a Roadhog hook. And hogs are great if you have someone who's confident enough to be on the Roadhog, but more often than not, you want to use a hog. And this is, I'm sorry to anyone that hates having this happen to you, but you stop a fight before it starts. And that is, you go take wonky positioning, you get behind them, and you pull someone in and just eviscerate them before a fight can happen. That is how a Roadhog typically works right now because of how much value they get doing that. But being on defense on King's Row, honestly, be on the high ground, have one person. In most cases, it's someone who can get from high to low ground quite easily. You know, a D.Va, a Genji. If you need someone to touch point, alternate touches, but make sure you're controlling that high ground because it's the safest position for you to be in. And supports, it's very hard for them to get run onto when they're on the high ground, and they can just continue to heal their team up.
I do have to say, though, separate from the high ground strat, do you think we might see a little bit of a Reinhardt? Because in Overwatch 1, Reinhardt was one of the dominant, oppressive heroes on King's Row, but now they don't have their Zarya, but Mei is still viable.
We might see a Reinhardt. If there is someone who's very confident on him from Overwatch 1 going into Overwatch 2, I say go for it. Just understand what type of comps you're going into. And if you see a comp that has a lot of movement, don't go for it. It's just not worth it. But if you see a very slow burn comp happening, go ahead, pop it on the Reinhardt. Just make sure you're communicating when you're shifting, because a Reinhardt that shifts off cooldown and just gets deleted every fight is not a Reinhardt adding value to your team.
Understandable. I mean, just like the Roadhog that doesn't get the hook before the fight, not adding value to your team there. It looks like neither team's going to come out on the Reinhardt so far. What do you expect in terms of DPS, other than the Mei?
Other than Mei, probably still that the Soldier Sojourn, but it actually looks like we're going to
Reinhardt.
Yeah, we've got Diamond Dog actually answering our prayers as a Spacefire, both coming out on the Reinhardt. We've got Lyric gone with the Bassi play, which is quite interesting, and Prefix, again, going with that Junkrat, both providing a lot of damage. We have yet to see what Avian's going to pop out. So we've got KJ coming out with that Cassidy, and then Avian going with the Sojourn, both of which can be quite oppressive. It's just going to be a matter of landing damage where it needs to be, especially because, like, in all honesty, the Reinhardt shield doesn't survive as long as it used to, it feels like, in this game, because he is so stationary. Unless Triplet or Pando is going to be sticking with their Rein quite a bit here, those Reins are going to be in hot water for quite a bit of time, but never mind. Avian's actually going to swap over to the Bastion.
Double Bastion, double Reinhardt. I'm thrilled to see the Reinhardt right now.
Oh, no. Oh!
And it looks like they're just right in their spawn getting that value. The Tornadoes with a phenomenal first point hold. Somebody's got to heal Lyric up, and it looks like they're definitely getting that. But because of some cheeky Rein play, now they get to hold this choke with an extra 10 seconds.
I'll be honest, I'm a little shocked that Diamond didn't get anybody off that charge. Well, not Diamond. Spacefire didn't get anybody off that sneaky charge. And no one scouted that the Reinhardt wasn't in front of them. When they saw Lyric, they should have been looking for Rein, and they should have taken out Spacefire.
And it definitely, they might not have been expecting the Reinhardt because, oh, can't that Lucio. Oh, I want to see it. Lyric getting that double elimination before they goes down, especially onto that Moira. Even though Lyric goes down, that is a fight win for the Tornadoes here as they push them back into that choke with Junkrat spam.
They got to be careful, though, because it looks like this Bastion's choosing to go to this high ground by themselves, and they have a pinch happening from Pando and Prefix, so they're going to go down. And it does look like that Reinhardt is getting a lot of damage put onto them from Prefix and from Pando.
This is what you were talking about. Ryan's not very mobile. He can't really get out of the fight there as we see Diamond Dog just get pin killed by Spacefire, pinched in that corner like you were talking about.
And it does look like we've got Genji trying to get out. Can KJ? No, Prefix just deletes them with that landmine.
And it looks like now the Tornadoes are setting up for their next fight. Actually, no, they're just going to hard engage with that Junk Tire. This is the beginning of the fight. We'll be unable to get any eliminations, so we're kind of in like a soft reset of the fight here before it really begins.
Yeah, we also have both Reinhardt getting awfully close to those shatters, but Chum and Spum is getting insanely close to that Coalescence. And if you hit that Coalescence, you can pop the Lucio amp. Lots of people can go down pretty quick, but Lyric's going to go down, and KJ's going to go down as well.
Lots of trades coming out. The fight still hasn't truly begun. No, now the fight has begun as that shatter comes down, and Avian is on your background on that Bastion. Spacefire can't turn in time. No, that is a huge Bastion flank. What is it tonight with King's Row and flanks, and the Everest are going to take point one. because of Avian. If you're an Everest fan, Avian's your guy right now.
That's just an unfortunate circumstance. I mean, mid-fight, not accounting for who is where and figuring out if someone is either dead or in a flanking position is very important. And there, they did not realize Avian had gone to the high ground.
I will say, other than that, the Tornadoes have had a good hold, and other than that shatter, the Tornadoes have had a good hold. As Sound Barrier is coming out, the Tornadoes really want to be aggressive right now. They say, we gave you 0.1, but we're not going to give you any more than that. We're going to hold up to this doorway, and because Spacefire is just going off on the Reinhardt, they get to hold all the way in the enemy team spawn. Looking for another sneaky pin.
And I do think Space is going to get it. Oh, they just barely whiffed it onto Diamond Dog. I think Diamond might have saw it at the last possible second using that 360 vision when they're holding shield. As we hear both DPS ults get popped here. Genji Blade as well as the Bastion ult get dropped, but Prefix and Kiba both pick up one for themselves.
And those are trades, so Nano comes out. Now the Tornadoes are trying to be aggressive with that Junkrat. They need some immediate eliminations because they can't push past this doorway, so they've got to get them before they get there. And with that Junk Tire, should they choose to commit it, I think an elimination can come out. No! The Everest are going to stop that opportunity before it even gets there, and because of that, they have gained some space, and the Tornadoes, you can see, are just running away.
We have Lyric choosing to swap over to the Echo here, which is actually a huge pick considering the other team does not have much hit scan for themselves. I mean, Avian might be able to pepper some damage onto him, but not a whole lot. So they can be very impressive, and they get very free high ground control for their team. And forcing split damage, as I mentioned earlier, can be very important to keeping your team alive.
I do think that Diamond Dog is going to struggle, especially against this high ground on the enemy team. He's going to have to just be put in the waiting position.
She is going to take quite a bit of damage, but she stays alive, and Lyric and Pando both go down. Spacefire, though, with a massive shatter. Yeah, that was definitely personal.
As we begin that fight there, trades are still coming out. Teams are still, even 2 members of the Everest are on the cart with no remaining members of the Tornadoes. Pando on that Zenyatta swap, though. What do you think about that?
I think this is predominantly to keep Lyric alive so you don't have to pull attention by looking up at Lyric to heal them. So that'll help Lyric in the long run. It'll also help Pando get some more value as well with Discords and Harmony just being constantly on Lyric. But Lyric right now is a little bit too far forward. They need to be careful. They're choosing to back up, which is smart. Diamond Dog, her shield's getting awfully weak, but she has Shatter online. Let's see if she can get anything with it, considering that Spacefire has swapped over to Zarya, so she can only protect herself and one other person if those bubbles are perfectly timed.
And it looks like Diamond Dog, they want it. They get it onto the Zarya, they see the personal, and they're just going to go ahead and take it. Try to pin him on the cart, but they end up getting slept there. The Tornadoes now have a Nano on the field. That is a Nano Zarya, and at this point, the Everest kind of have to give up a little bit of space there. So the Nano Zarya and Coalescence, but they're not giving up the cart. And because of that, Zarya has been taken very weak. Spacefire, Kiva's trying to keep them alive. Lyric, though, looks like they're going to be taken very weak. A single shot will keep them in the fight. But now it is Kiva that's being threatened as this Diamond Dog is just walking into your backline, getting all of the eliminations. And now the Tornadoes are just, they have no more fight. They got clean wiped there, and Lyric was the only one they were able to take down.
And I'll be honest, Spacefire going to the Zarya is okay. I mean, you got high charge very fast, and the slight Zarya change, which is you get 2 bubbles and you can spell them how you so choose, is great. But expecting a grab surge in a 1-fight territory is not the best situation to be in. Honestly, possibly swapping off the Reinhardt and going to instead an Orisa to prevent Diamond Dog from able just hitting shift key off cooldown and letting her do whatever she felt like. Into your team might have been the play there. But I do not feel like the Zarya was the way to go.
I think Zarya there didn't actually bring anything in terms of ultimates, right? I mean, they brought a lot of damage, but they lost the fight when they got shattered there, and then they weren't able to get all of the eliminations because they couldn't push in after getting shattered. So I think Zarya is not necessarily a bad pick. That was just not the time for the Zarya, absolutely, like just like you were talking about. You're not going to charge a Graviton Surge unless you win that fight, and you're not going to win the fight if your whole team gets shattered.
Unfortunately, and it also comes down to ult tracking because I said it right before Diamond went in, which is you can use those bubbles to protect yourself and one other person, but you have to time it perfectly, and Diamond literally just waited to see both bubbles go down. She recognized that one had been expelled, and then Diamond immediately saw the next one go right onto Zarya herself again, and she just chose to shatter right then and there as soon as the bubble went down. There was no hope at that point.
And it does look like we have Prefix on the Widowmaker, probably looking for some immediate picks here. I don't know if we will see them hard commit to that Widowmaker. Maybe the swap. No, it looks like they're just going to go in. The Tornadoes are going in on that Orisa into the Reinhardt.
Spacefire took a lot of damage and managing to stay alive. Prefix is going to go on the Widow, though. Let's see if they can get value or if they're going to be forced off. And no one is putting damage up here, though, so that might help them out as Spacefire goes down. Lyric gets KJ. It does look like this Widow is not intending on swapping, but they are not landing shots on the squishies. Instead, they're just putting them onto the tank, which doesn't quite do as much as you need it to.
I think that the biggest thing there was Spacefire did not have the support they needed as they were trying to int as hard as they could. Prefix couldn't do anything as soon as they rounded that corner on the statue, independent of them not being able to hit their important shots on the squishies outside of around that statue. And as we reset and go next, Prefix is in a more aggressive position.
There we go.
And they finally get someone onto the support, exactly what you're looking for. This might get the Tornadoes in as they go in. That Reddit Lucio is already in, not even wall riding, just jumping over your Reinhardt. And that is Orisa walking on Rein, which feels like a total turnaround from Overwatch 1.
Orisa is quite irksome to deal with now. I mean, if timed perfectly, you can actually use Spear Spin to hold the majority of a Reinhardt charge as well. As long as you're backing up while it's happening, you won't be pushed back until the very, very end of the charge and your Spear Spin's completely cooled off. So it's an interesting dichotomy that these two tanks now have in comparison to what we saw in Overwatch 1.
Because previously, Reinhardt just walks onto an Orisa and, like, she gets bullied, right? If the Reinhardt is allowed to approach, there's not a lot Orisa can do in melee range. But now, she has an incredible amount of options, but less when she gets hacked as this fight begins here with Coalescence. Spear Spin, the ultimate is going to be attempted. They're just getting hacked on cooldown, so Spacefire has to give up a lot of space here. Avian for the Everest, even though not a lot of eliminations came out, I would say that was some pretty big Sombra play.
For sure, and it's important to remember for anyone who's watching, Sombra did get quite a huge change. Hack only works for 1 second, however, you get extra damage onto the target that you hack coming from the Sombra, so you charge EMP very fast, but it does not do what it used to, so it doesn't take everyone out of the fight for such an extended period of time. It just means that you get a squishier target to hit if you manage to hack someone who's very important, and we can already see another EMP is online for Avian because they've just been doing so much work just hacking and doing damage on that weakened target.
Spacefire's getting bullied by that hack there. No, they're just getting perma-hacked. Yet again, the second fight in a row. Somebody's got to call out that Sombra. Stop Spacefire from getting bullied here as the Everest take their space and hold that doorway.
Everest again is just having a Avian's having a heyday right now. They aren't even trying to scout them out. I understand it doesn't seem so bad anymore as you don't get hacked for such an extended period of time, but just allowing Avian to get this much value, you need to start doing something about it.
And as we see, Lyric is now on the Sojourn, on the point there, trying to see what we can do so far. Spacefire has just been perma-hacked anytime the fight starts. So their Orisa is effectively down her abilities the entire fight until somebody scouts out that Sombra. But Chum is Fun is down, so Sombra might actually not be able to swing this even as the trade comes out.
Diamond Dog is also going to get very low, forced to back off. We hear another hack, but finally Avian gets turned on and taken down. It's not so bad being hacked, as I said, but it is bad to let yourself get hacked that much. So hopefully we see Prefix start trying to just pepper damage into corridors, as does Pando and Lyric, just to scout out where the Sombra's at so she doesn't get to go where she wants at will.
And it looks like Prefix is setting up in a corridor, waiting for the Everest to come to them there, and just waiting for the bet. Now they're going to show themselves. Nothing's been decided just yet. Avian's going to get eliminated by Lyric. Prefix not going to get a ton of value on that Junkrat flank, but at least making them look as Lyric is going to go down, and it looks like this fight will go the way of the Tornadoes.
There's Lucio still alive, just trying to run it for their life. Finally, they will go down at the last second. We've got Riptire online from Prefix. We have Railgun, as we also have Terror Surge coming online for the Tornadoes. Let's see if that's enough. It should be plenty, but I don't want to see all of them get popped at once. It'll be interesting to see how they plan to deal with Diamond Dog's Shatter, because the only person that can survive that right now without actually getting shattered is going to be Spacefire with their Fortify. So let's see if everyone else on that team is prepared for it and is out of line of sight.
And it looks like Prefix, at least, on the high ground, can't get shattered. No, they're going to have to drop with a single HP. Avian's going to take down Kiba. That is your main healer down. I think the Tornadoes just GG go next fight at this point.
There's still plenty of time on that clock, and time is a huge resource when it comes to Overwatch. At this point, you don't need to be hoping to beat that time, but you want to be looking to finish with time in order to bring this into overtime and have it on a more even playing field.
And especially because the Everest and the Tornadoes are really trying to win this. And because they push that back, they're guaranteed at least the same time. going against the Tornadoes, right? The Tornadoes are in the position of, if they cap it right now, they'll get about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. But if they lose this fight, they have less time than the Everests. As we get started here, Spacefire is just going to get taken down, and at this point, Diamond Dog just gets to go feral, and that is a fight 1 for the Everest. So Tornadoes, by default, have less time.
Unfortunately, and now if you can't best their time, look to at least get over a minute is always what you want to be doing if you're expecting to go into OT, which of course, Everest already have 2 minutes and 30 seconds on the clock. So that's what they're hoping for. We'll have to see if they can get this checkpoint though, because right now, it's going to get a little bit more difficult if this tire doesn't land on anybody, and it doesn't.
And it looks like Arissa's having some trouble walking onto the Reinhardt, especially as the EMP Dragons is going to come out. The Everests have committed a lot of ults to this fight. They can't afford to lose. Even as the Nano comes out, no eliminations have been happening. So far, the Tornadoes rotating back. Now's their time to go in. They no longer have any member but Spacefire being hacked. But because Spacefire has just been hacked on cooldown, that really stops them from getting a lot of space. That shatter that you were talking about goes on to almost all members on the low ground except for Spacefire, and that is the fight off of the back of the shatter.
Spacefire managed to stay alive because we did see that Fortify go up. You have enough time when that animation starts to proc Fortify, but again, it comes down to tracking the enemy team. Are they going to have shatter online? Yes, okay. You don't have any means of blocking it. Don't be on the low ground.
And at this point, that approach on that corner is awkward because you see the high ground in the background, but sometimes that's not necessarily enough support. But, like, your Junkrat can't always get a lot of value from that high ground. And their Rissa, I feel like, truly cannot walk in right now just because she's been perma-hacked, and it looks like now it's the Monkey, so Sombra will have a more difficult time with that, but they're just going to get booped off the map. And this is less than a minute territory, just like you were talking about, which is very, very dangerous. What do they need to do?
Well, they did what I would have suggested, which is swapping over to a more mobile comp. They've gone with Spacefire on the Monkey. They also swapped over to the Hanzo Genji, so the Shimada brothers coming in. And Moira on its Kiva might be enough to sustain even if they lose their main tank. They just really got to be targeting the Squishies as opposed to just focusing a lot of their damage on Diamond Dog. But Pando putting that Discord orb might be enough as we see a fantastic beat come out, utilizing that jump onto high ground to make sure they shorten the animation period.
And it looks like they still can't go in. The Tornadoes are having a lot of difficulty even approaching on King's Road here. As, no, Spacefire is just going to get spammed down as the Dragon's coming out. This is still a long engagement here. Prefix is going to get the elimination onto KJ, winning that battle of the Shimada brothers. Genji coming out superior there. That's 2 trades for the side of the Tornadoes. Now is the time to get aggressive, especially as Triplet goes down. But the Everest still have one last touch.
And they have Avian very close to that EMP. I think their translocator is not in a good spot, though. So unfortunately, yeah, they're going to go down after getting scouted out. No time left on the clock. Triplet, it's up to you to Reddit Lucio a little bit to stay alive and keep your team up here. Let's see if you can do that as we hear Primal Rage come out on point, and a lot of your team gets very low in that corner.
And the Tornadoes do still have members on point. They're getting the eliminations. The Everest need trades right now. Like that! KJ on the Pando. Huge trade. One of their supports down. Now somebody else, if they can get the second trade. Not quite there, but overall a valiant effort by the Efforts. But even though they took them into overtime, so the Tornadoes are at a massive time disadvantage. How do you deal with that as a player?
This is now very difficult because the Tornadoes didn't get any time left on this clock, and a lot of it is due to this Sombra play. I mean, chronically being hacked, not having someone spy checking a lot, made it very easy for Sombra to do what she does best. And it's important to remember also, it's a lot harder to stop these hacks because she can do it while in invis, and so that's a very difficult situation to be in. But right now, Tornadoes have to have a 100% perfect defense, or they're going to lose. They're looking to walk away with this with a draw because they had no time left on the clock. Everest just needs 1 tick, and that's it.
So what are the big points that the Tornadoes are looking to hold?
Try to definitely make a fight unbalanced by getting an early pick onto someone if you need to. They do have that Sombra, so Lyric should be scouting and looking for positioning and seeing where they're going. So gather as much intel as you can utilizing that Sombra. Use that hack to force someone to either disengage in a fight early or take away a lot of value from someone or take away their attention resource from their front line onto you. So in the form of Lyric, hopefully they're going to be looking to hack Chuma's Fum or looking to actually hack Diamond Dog just so that 1 second of that of the shield going down allows their team to push forward and get damage onto Diamond Dog.
And I think the Reinhardt will have a much harder time dealing with the Sombra than the Winston, so we might actually get to see someone other than Spacefire get bullied by Sombra here on this approach.
Diamond Dog also is very gifted on the Winston, so we'll have to see if she decides to make that swap, and instead they're actually just going to run up here because Genji decided to be in a 1v1 position, but Chum's Fun will go down. Prefix is going to go down, so it's an even trade, but Chum's Fun going down means this might be a reset already for this team if they can't maintain their stability here in this corridor.
And they are unable to here as we see the tank bars dropping really, really weak. They will actually no. They're going to get those eliminations and just cap first point. They send somebody over there and the Tornadoes weren't ready for it. So that's Kings Row just immediately going over to the Everests.
I'll be completely honest, I do not understand why the Moira went up there, but that's something for VOD Review to take care of later. The important thing was not being up there.
I think that rotation ended up actually helping the Everest there because they had the majority of their team going up to the high ground, right? I don't actually know who the solo member was on point. Did you end up seeing who rotated point?
No idea. I think it might have been the Sombra.
That makes the most sense, like just like logically, because we were just watching Diamond Dog's perspective, right? And Diamond Dog's like, I can't see who's over there. Like it was probably communicated that they were doing this two-pronged approach because I mean it ended up working really well and taking them that point before even a minute had passed by on the clock. But like, who capped point? We have no idea.
I'm gonna just say it was Avian, and Avian, if it wasn't you, take the credit. I mean, there is no way that we'll know on the desk right now, so I'm just gonna say it was you, and if anyone else is trying to argue, I'm just not gonna agree with them.
So going into this next map, and these teams are 1-1 now. These teams, both of them have a lot to prove to themselves and to each other. What are you expecting from Circuit Royale?
I'm definitely anticipating, once again, Sombra play, because it's been working out so heavily. And if you're anticipating that Sombra play, make sure that it's not being done as easily as it was. And I understand it's weird to scout for a Sombra in Overwatch 2, but you still need to be doing that. You can't just let them run around freely. You need to make sure that they get detected and scout them out.
And what are some really, really big, especially tanks are the ones we've seen bullied. So what are the big tanks that we're looking for? And actually, there's not going to come out a Sombra, but what are some good tanks that counter Sombra?
Well, thankfully, unfortunately, I actually don't get to see the tank that counter Sombra the easiest, which was most definitely the Diva pick. Instead, Diamond Dogs actually be popping onto the Doomfist, and the Doomfist, it still holds true here for Overwatch 2 as it did in Overwatch 1. You get shut down quite a bit by a Sombra, however, considering the hack only lasts for 1 second and you have a lot of sustain and that damage absorbability, you can survive for quite a bit if there was going to be one. However, there is not. We also have Spacefire going onto the Sigma. Both of these tanks, extremely powerful when they're utilizing their kits properly. However, Doomfist can be a lot more oppressive if the side of the Tornadoes does not keep an eye on when they're using that absorbability, because as soon as they use it and they get full punch online, that is a one punch, one kill type of situation. So they need to be careful not charging up Diamond Dog.
And it looks like the prefix for the Tornadoes has that hard Mercy pocket on that high ground, which is a big thing. This almost feels like Havana, like you have your Ashe set way far back with their Mercy, trying to see what they can do. But no, Pando, I don't know what Pando was doing over there, but they're going to get Helix rocketed. And that takes a lot of value away from your Ashe as this fight begins, though we see the Ana still on the high ground as well. So they will be able to help their Sigma out, but not necessarily win the duel against the Soldier long range.
Prefix is going to manage to sustain here. We saw Diamond Dog go down quite early to trying to gain this high ground footing, and they have. Avian's going to take out Prefix, and now they're going to this corner. This corner is where things get a little hairy again for some teams. Ooh. It's pushing too far forward from your team when there's not enough staggering happening, but it looks like Diamond's claiming the space at a good tempo for their team to keep up with them. However, Lyric does find Avian. Diamond needs to be careful, though, because they are very far forward now.
And that Widowmaker almost going to take them down with 51 HP out of 450. Doomfist is the lowest held of the tanks, I believe. So he doesn't, you see him go back to his Moira and Lucio like, please help, and hide behind this barrier here. What are the Tornadoes trying? Actually, no, Monkey's just going to go in. I don't even have time to throw as the next fight begins. And Diamond Dog really wants to get up onto that high ground, but has so far been unable to as the fight begins, and Spacefire is going to get taken down. The Tornadoes at this point have to back up.
Tornadoes need to not be letting Spacefire go in by themselves like that. It's the same thing with Overwatch 1 that holds true here. You can't go in by yourself as a tank and expect it to work out in your favor unless the other team just makes mistake after mistake. As you can see, Diamond Dog, when she's going in by herself, she is prepared to get out as fast as possible and has cooldowns available to make sure she can do that, which is that damage absorb as well as her shift. And those two things allow her to get in and get out, whereas Monkey doesn't have that. I mean, if you drop barrier, you get a couple extra seconds, but the cooldown for jump is still extremely large when everyone is looking at you.
I do think that Doomfist is the more mobile of the two tanks, which enables Diamond Dog to, like you said, get in, get out, just like they're going to do there. They're going to get in, soft engage, hard engage on the Monkey. Now Nano's going to come out with a massive nade and sleep on the Diamond Dog. Diamond Dog's just getting bullied here, but KJ is going to more than make up for that with a massive visor. The Tornadoes are getting some trades, but they're going to lose that fight off the back of an amazing engage by the Everests.
We have Meteor Strike coming online now for the side of the Everest. Diamond Dog is very close to it. They also have B and Coalescence, so no DPS ult, but that's fine. The only thing that's coming off of Tornadoes now is Primal Rage. You've got Diamond going in, doing some damage, taking a lot of cooldowns. That was Dash, that was Fade, and that was Bubble. So that is fine if you go down one when that much resources expelled from the other team. You just need to be ready to respond with an ultimate. And I anticipate Chuma's Fun being ready to pop Coalescence here pretty soon, but never mind, we're going to see the Primal come online instead. So this is just kind of a zone out that Monkey and do a soft reset.
And there actually really wasn't a reason to Primal, or, I mean, honestly, actually Coalesce, they do have the full team now, so the Coalescence does have a meaning. But the Primal was done with members down, and they already had checkpoints, so I think that was a little bit of an overcommitment there, as Avian is going to go down, but the Everests are taking a lot of space here, even after capping point.
And you can see Diamond Dog gets a little low, but the Moira immediately jumps in to help them out. Fortunately, though, they went out of LOS so the Moira can keep them alive. However, you're right. Yet again, they're getting space and they're keeping it. So this payload's pushing and it's not really getting stopped very often.
Chuma's Fun wants Prefix there, and I want it for the win the duel for us on the Moira there. They will be unable to, as they're going to have to back out and understandably heal their team. The Everests, it feels like their approach is very scrappy right now. What do they need to do to get into this?
I think realizing when a lost fight is actually a lost fight. Yes, we have a lot of scrappy fights here in Overwatch 1, but ultimates are extremely, extremely important and can flip an entire fight, but you can't do that when you're down 2 and 3 already. As we see Lyric and Pando both go down to that Soldier ultimate from KJ.
And now the Everests are up 2. Now, up 1 as Prefix is going to get booped off of the edge there. The Everests still have a push though they are approaching right into the Tornado spawn, so they are approaching full team as KJ is by themselves. What do you think of this flank?
So long as they're not called out, they'll be okay, and it does look like they had 2 come in to help them out. They'll go down, but there was a trade. Pando goes down as well. Prefix popping that ultimate is going to be able to pepper some damage down. There was a sound barrier though, so it's going to be a little more difficult. And they do a damage to themselves because they did not count on that deflect.
They immediately stop shooting after they realize, ouch, that hurts. But it looks like this might actually end up being the end of the Tornadoes defense. No, this is the Hail Mary of Genji Blades. If this doesn't get value, they lose this point right here, and it's not getting value right now, especially as other ultimates come out, but sound barriers keeping members in fight. At this point, the Tornadoes are 4 in fight now as Lyric goes down and the Everests are getting aggressive. Spacefire is going to get Avian, and that turret even is going to come out. When did Prefix swap? I have no idea. The Sojourn on that high ground could end up being instrumental to the Tornadoes successfully defending as the Everests are knocked off the point.
This last point is a really hard one for anyone to cap just because of the way the spawn works out in favor of that defensive team, and it comes down to really taking advantage of positioning and understanding when to reset a fight. It does look like finally a reset is going to happen here for Team Everest. I'm hoping to see them do a full rotation out towards coastline here so that they can get that high ground advantage.
So the Tornadoes have, right now, they currently have the high ground advantage unless the Everests take that from them, and the spawn advantage. And like you were saying, the Everests need to take that, and they need to use their ultimates in the same fight. And they have a minute 50 seconds to do that.
So now it comes down to understanding a win condition here, and for the Everests, that is going to definitely be KJ using their ult. Oh, I thought that Lyric was about to go off the map.
Me too.
And we see KJ using it here in conjunction with that sound barrier. I don't understand why sound barrier was popped other than to try to gain space. It wasn't fully needed, and instead Triplet's going to go down anyway. So sound barrier is still something you really want to use as a defensive ability or as a sustain, and there it was not needed to go aggressive. More often than not, you lose using it aggressively.
And because of that, now the Everests, they also committed attack visor to that, so they have a minute and 13 seconds if they want to charge their ultimates. They're at a massive disadvantage as this isn't really a fight. This is just kind of, what are you expecting before we get into next fight here?
I expect Chuma's Phone to have that Coalescence online. Avian needs to stop staggering themselves as hard as they just did. And unfortunately for them, they're going to be going into 3, 4, almost all 5 ults on the side of the Tornadoes. So this one might be one that is not stacked in their favor. They need to get an early pick and not let Diamond go down.
This is second to last fight, too, for the Everest here, so they want to try to get out as many ultimates as they can without, ideally, if you're going to dry fight, you need to not use any of your own to try to get it back next time. That looks like they are not what they're doing there. As they push the Tornadoes off the high ground, most notably Lyric on that Sojourn, losing the high ground. That's a very big deal, especially as they are 93 to their own ultimate. And now the fight has dropped onto point. Chumasfum is going to go down, though, which, especially this close to spawn doors, that might just spell doom for the Everest push there.
We do see that Diamond Dog's going to go down to that Torbjorn ult, as well as Lyric just peppering damage onto them. 10-second territory. I don't know if Avian's going to be able to get a touch, especially because Lyric is scouting this outside coastline.
They're looking for that Tracer, expecting the Tracer to come. So far, the Tracer hasn't been able to yet. It looks like they're just barely going to get some members on the point. And there's Avian. Oh, Lyric got stuck and couldn't really do anything about that. That will give them a little bit of high ground. Not control, but take some of the oppression off of it as this fight here. Now it's just Prefix spamming with their turret, and KJ's going to take the turret down. It would be ideal if he could take the Torb down, especially as the Torb drops. The Everests need trades. They need more than that. They just need eliminations, and they need to stay alive right now. And with Diamond Dog going down, I don't actually think they'll be able to do that.
I think you're very right. Unfortunately, that tank is ever so important to sustaining. And with that, that's going to be the end of the first round. The Everest, so very close to reaching that final checkpoint.
But again, just like you were talking about, Circuit Royale, final point, incredibly hard to cap. It's almost comparable to 2CP in Overwatch 1, just because their spawn is right there, and they have high ground advantage. I would most easily compare it to Havana, which is not a 2CP map, but sometimes feels impossible to cap third point just because everything is so defensively favored. I mean, you're pushing into a castle, and you have long sight lines all the way through your spawn. Circuit Royale is very similar in that way. You're walking into an enemy, again, with that high ground, and especially, I think that Torb swap did work for them.
Yeah, Torbjorn can be extremely powerful, especially because you don't have to keep your turret alive. I mean, your turret can just be spamming down damage, and someone has to look at it eventually, which means they're not looking at someone on your team instead. I'm very interested to see how high ground control plays out into this one, because that high ground on last point is huge. But if you use it properly before you even get there, as opposed to letting your Winston just dive in off that second high ground to get to stop the payload before point 2, that high ground control can be huge, so long as the dive in and dive out are timed properly and you're not doing it by yourself. So we could see an opportunity here for Team Everest to hold back the Tornadoes much farther this time.
And it looks like they're setting up on the high ground. Everybody is in this map is very 2CP. I mean, we were just talking about it. It feels very 2CP. The defenders have a massive advantage, and there it is in the chat as well. And it looks like the Everests are holding this high ground, but giving the Tornadoes first corner.
And that is okay to give them first corner, so you have line of sight on them easier, and so your tank has an easier opportunity to get support when they go in and go out. We do see Diamond Dog there on the left. She's getting ready to go in. She does get a punch in and decides to come out immediately. Ooh. Takes enough of the attention away to allow Spacebar to get taken out as well.
And it looks like now the fight has, I mean, truly just kind of in the Everest favor here. There's not a ton the Tornadoes can do after their main tank goes down, and they're still just getting spam damage down main. At this point, the Everest should probably reset back up to that high ground, but it looks like they're just pushing in. No, they are resetting. Good.
There is that reset finally. Getting those stackers is nice and something you want to do, but so not always worth it if it forces you to be in a bad position, because had they gone down one, had the side of the Tornadoes gone down one, they could have easily just continued to push forward yet again and taken out anyone who's not in a high ground position. We'll have to wait and see though. They do have space yet again, jumping in with not a lot of follow-up, and immediately they go down after taking out Avian.
And as we go in here, Space is going to go down as well as Prefix, but the Everests still have a fight. They still have their Moira in the game, and they're backing up a little bit, giving a little bit of space to the Tornadoes, but as soon as I say that, they're going to go immediately back in without any eliminations and reset high ground.
They're doing a fantastic job of not over-aggressing here, and they're definitely capitalizing on Space, taking space when he shouldn't be. because he doesn't have the support of his team. And we hear a Tactical Advisor come online, so Lyric goes down to KJ. Space is going to take out Chumas Bum, so there goes the large portion of that sustain. We'll have to see if Space can keep pushing forward as they find another one. They do go down to Triplet.
I would say the hard engage on the Lucio stopped that Moira from getting the peel that they needed to stay in the fight there. But even though the Everests are down there, Moira, they're still in this fight. They have that Lucio. He's on the heels. You just have to play very careful, and your life's very stressful if you're Diamond Dog.
We almost have the beat online as
There it is.
well.
Ooh,
And
double.
does manage to get everyone in that, so that's going to be a lot of sustain for that. For their team coming out from Triplet, as we also see Co get popped and the beat in return.
And it looks like support ultimates, this is the fight to use them. Triplet is going to go down. The Everests are not willing to give up this high ground hold just yet, and because of that elimination, they have the ability to reset back up. What do the Tornadoes need to do to break this hold?
Honestly, they need to start focusing the squishies more because Triplet stayed alive that entire fight. I think we haven't actually seen Triplet die thus far. And Lucio provides so much utility, not only in the form of healing, but in the form of speed that can get people out of line of sight fast enough to heal them up. But they need to start focusing on Triplet. They're just getting too much value.
I will say, I will agree with you. And Triplet is definitely giving them the opportunities there. They're hard ending. They're going in. They're giving them the opportunity. They just need to capitalize on it. Diamond Dog, ooh, barely gets out through way of Meteor Strike. Gets the elimination, however. Somebody heal them, please. Nope, they're not going to get the healing that they need in time. And because of that, I think the Everests' high ground hold has finally been taken down.
They do have enough time to reset here and possibly stop us from getting to that checkpoint, but it's going to be a little bit rough. Triplet is speeding people out as fast as they can. I don't think Diamond Dog's going to be there in time, though. Nope, they are. So there's the full engage, and that is engaging with your tank to force back the enemy team. That's what we needed to see earlier, but they left the payload alone. They need to be careful, otherwise they might C9 it.
It looks like they're going to go ahead and try to win the fight before going back to the payload, but actually they're just going to lose. It looks like they're going to lose the fight in terms of numbers, and the Tornadoes are just going to win that fight. What happened to the Everests there?
I think it was exactly what we were talking about, which was they split focus. I was saying go to the payload because they almost C9'd it, but they went. One person went back to the contest too soon without the rest of their team when the full team needed to have gone back to the contest. And because that one person got there first, they were taken out immediately and just melted, so the numbers were not in their favor.
And KJ's trying to get a little bit of that favor back there, even though the Tornadoes have already capped that first checkpoint there. That is a visor from high ground, and Pando is not having any of it as they hide behind the box there. KJ's going to get the elimination, and I think the fight has now we're in the cleanup stages of the fight.
It does look like the Everests are going to be forced back a bit. The Tornadoes are going to be forced back a bit, and this is what I was talking about earlier. That high ground, even though it's after that point's already been taken, it can create a lot of damage just to pepper down, and it's difficult to gain it back if you don't use corridors properly here. Because of where this payload's positioned at, they have no choice but to actually go to the payload and be in the line of sight of this enemy team on the defense constantly, and that can be very rough to deal with.
We see the Coalescence pop. They are committing ultimates to this fight. The Coalescence and the Beat are both going to come out. No, both Beats. That is both teams beefed up with Lucio shields here. No eliminations. I mean, as you expect from the double Beat. Avian going in with Diamond Dog. It feels like that duo, they've just been in on it together. However, they're not able to eliminate Lyric yet, and Lyric will win the Battle of the Sojourns and eliminate Avian, but Diamond Dog and Chumasfum are going to come back, and the Everests now have the right to aggress or even reset back on high ground.
We're in roughly 1.5 fight territory now, because it takes roughly still 45 seconds for a full fight to happen here, even as scrappy as they get in Overwatch 2. But now as I'm saying this, we are at one fight territory, so Tornadoes need to clean this up immediately and find a squishy and take them out. Hopefully we do not see Space go down immediately off that engage, though.
It looks like they soft engaged and then they dropped back so the rest of their team could support him. Ooh, gets that punch onto the Moira, but was not able to absorb enough damage to get that immediate elimination. Does just barely get Pando on that Lucio weak. Diamond Dog is not having follow-up for their dives. They're diving good targets. They just are missing a little bit of a damage as we go in here, and no eliminations have come out from either team. And it looks like Diamond Dog is going to commit to another dive, but is just trying to 1v1 the Soldier. Diamond Dog, you really need the rest of your team to be there with you because you're diving the targets, and I want this for you. But so far, they're not able to capitalize on any.
And it looks like they are going to go down, just being a little bit too close for comfort against Pando as well as Prefix. We have hit overtime, but being down 2, I think this is a reset and just let them have that point. I mean, they're going to be so low on time resource. You can definitely hold this 3rd point. At less than 90 seconds on the clock, it's doable, but they need to start actually, as you said, going in with Diamond Dog and making sure they're focus firing on who Diamond's going in on.
And what's the approach here? Is Coast still the strategy for the Tornadoes?
I believe so, yes. And then a callback to an old Doc's keys to the game, tempo control, which they're doing a great job right now, using an ultimate to get that space and maintain it. However, using Co and Soldier ult might have been a little bit of overkill. I think they could have gotten away with just using Coalescence as opposed to using that Soldier ult at the same time.
And now they will be in the awkward position of having to charge another one before we go in. But Sojourn has her own ultimate, very, very close to being up there. So we'll see if they're able to get value as Lyric sets up on the far right, trying to win the duel. That's not a duel anymore. That's their whole team. Be careful, Lyric, as Diamond Dog is going to go in, but they're so weak. Lyric, no. Lyric almost gets it, just gets punched off the edge, and that's why Doomfist is great on this point, outdoors.
Kiba goes down as well. KJ gets taken out, but I do believe that this fight has flipped in favor of Team Everest. They're going to sustain here. We are at half fight now, so someone needs to get in and get a touch. It might be Panda who's going to be able to do it. Spacefire will be able to follow up and sustain with that Primal Rage, but I don't know. Pando might be able to, but they're choosing to go coastline. This could take away precious time that they need to get in position to get ready for that touch.
And it looks like that game is just going to come to a close there. It looks like the Tornadoes will end up picking that up, probably through, like you were talking about, going around that coastline and trying to get those eliminations because, I mean, you can't become the Esports Tower winner just letting them spam you down main. Do you have thoughts on that map other than 3rd point that we unfortunately lost?
Definitely knowing that 3rd point is very 2CP, as we on desk were saying, and the players were saying, you need to treat it like it's a 2CP at that point. And that is, if you lose one person, you need to respond with an ultimate. But if you lose 2 people, that is a full reset. Stop staggering your team out and just stop taking damage. Because at that point, you're giving them resource, you're giving them ultimates, and it's going to be harder to take that point.
And if you want to be seen by expert college recruiters, talk directly to esports industry insiders like pro athletes, team general managers, and game producers, then join the club. Esports Tower players get insider access to industry insights, and with our featured rumbles, recruiters are taking notice too. It's a great way to score exposure if you're looking to start your path to pro or land a collegiate scholarship. And I do want to add on to that approach to 2CP. If you're down 1, sometimes an ultimate can take you back, just like you were talking about, but that changes a little bit if you're down one of your supports, for example, especially your main support. At that point, it's going to take a 6-man ultimate, which isn't usually reliable, but can sometimes come through, just as a little bit of an add-on to everything that you were talking about. Now, as we move in, we've had some great games tonight. And with great games, I mean, it's the players that make those, right? So is there anybody specific that you would like to highlight? Because the obvious choice of Bonesaw absolutely wasn't here, and so other people more than stepped up to fill that role.
Mine's going to go to Lyric. I mean, I feel like they got play of the game more than once. It's kind of hard to argue that one. I mean, the game thought they popped off, so I think production's going to agree with the sentiment of it going with Lyric. However, Diamond Dog and Space both did a fantastic job on the tanks as well, and I'd love to see tanks get play of the game and player of the match as well, but I feel like Lyric kind of was a little bit more flashy.
I definitely will agree with you on the Lyric. I was thinking, like, we gotta mention Lyric if we don't get it, and it looks like who is player of the game? I mean, Lyric is definitely up there, and Joe is also for consideration. Lots of the Soldier players, lots of these hit scan players will get value. It will end up not actually being Lyric. It will end up being Joe. Same hero, different player here. And the ICCU player of the game is brought to you by Idaho Central Credit Union, who believes a great player makes a team more successful, just like Idaho Central's helping members achieve financial success. Joe is the Idaho Central Credit Union player of the game, and one of the players that has been highlighted to us by their coaches as a major in-game leader for the Riptides, this is only their 2nd Rumble. And they're going toe-to-toe with the Tornadoes and the Everest, who have been reigning champions for weeks at a time.
So keep up the good work, Joe. You'll probably get more players of the game, but yeah, honestly, being that it was kind of cute to see our own BSU players there for a second, but way to be taking the reins there and being an in-game lead. It's very important.
And just like you were talking about earlier, an in-game lead really brings a lot of target focus to a team, which is the single most important thing that we see a lot of teams have success with or failure, depending on whether or not they have that target focus and there's somebody calling all of that. I mean, even you with your coaching position on the target focus, that's what you bring your team, and that's what enabled them to win our showdown a couple weeks ago.
Yes, and it's not just the target focus. It's when and where to fight, which play into those Doc's keys of the game, which is fight in unexpected places. You can be the one to create the tempo for your team, even if you're losing. Just be like, okay, we're already all here. Let's fight here and now, as opposed to waiting for the payload or waiting for the push so that the other team doesn't get the position that they want. So an in-game lead brings so much to the table, and being comfortable to be that person, and people also respecting you in that role and listening to you is very important. So great job, Joe, for putting yourself in those shoes and being willing to do it, because not everyone's willing to be an in-game lead, especially when they're new to a team.
And Joe, again, you are our ICCU player of the game, and you're an in-game lead for the Riptides. Keep up the good work, and we expect to see more great things from you. And to close out our amazing night, nobody was able to take down the Tornadoes. They are still the reigning champion of the Esports Tower Rumble right now, taking week 5. And we do have some top 5 plays that will be presented immediately after this. Congratulations to all of our teams on a very exciting week 5 spring Overwatch Rumble. The Tornadoes had maybe their toughest week yet, being taken to 3 maps twice, which is not something we've previously seen, but they still head into the grand finals undefeated. Can the Everest get revenge in the grand finals next week? Make sure to tune in next Thursday at 6 p.m. EST to see the thrilling conclusion of our week 5 Overwatch 2 Rumbles. We will close out with the top 5 plays presented by the Idaho Army National Guard, who invites you to take your impressive critical thinking skills into real time. With more than 10 jobs offering a $20,000 bonus and your degree of choice paid for, the Idaho Army National Guard is the best team out there. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Did eventually have Avian turn on them with a little help from Moira, so they do go down. But right now, it looks like Tornadoes are just trying to regain a little bit of footing as the forward push is coming into them. Lyric and Spacefarer and Panda will find one, as will Kiva. So 3 go down to the side of the Everest as this barrier just keeps going forward. The Everest up here because Genji decided to be in a 1v1 position, but Chum Spun will go down. Prefix is going to go down. Even trade, but Chum Spun going down means this might be a reset already as soon as they can't maintain their stability here in the corridor.
And they are unable to here as we see the tank bars dropping really, really weak. They will actually no. They're going to get those eliminations, and Reaper chilling out behind them. Instead, they're going to take a TP, which is creative. It might work out in their favor, but that's a lot of damage going into one spot. The Dragon Skin pop might help them make some distance, but it looks like KJ is going to be doing a lot of damage. And then, we get to see that Soaker and Railgun just a bit before the bomb is going to come out. And it looks like the Everest win that off the back of it. But they're going to go ahead and get that res onto Joe, which is really big. And they bombs the Tranquility immediately after that. The Everest want to win this fight. We are committing ult, we are taking space, we are on your Orisa, but it feels like the target focus is a little bit lacking as this fight goes on longer than it reasonably should, even as they're going to win.
Long fights are okay though, especially
elimination so far. The Riptides are up 1 in this fight, so the Tornadoes are kind of like reconvening back on the push spot here. Somebody better catch that Lucio out. The blade is committed. The Tornadoes are now down 3 and are gonna lose this fight off the back of an ult.
Joe, that was quite spicy if I do say so myself.
We love this.